On behalf of the Council's Board of Directors, our Executive Committee, and all our members, welcome to the 2021 National Competitiveness Forum, the premier assembly of our nation's leaders from business, government, academia, labor, and national laboratories, who come together to explore the most important domestic and global competitiveness issues of the day. They come together to consider the challenges of tomorrow, those emerging on the horizon, and to identify new pathways to greater economic growth, productivity, prosperity, and security for all Americans. For more than 3 decades, the Council has championed a competitiveness agenda for the United States to ensure U.S. global economic and technology leadership, attract investment, build our talent base, and spur the commercialization of new ideas and technologies. The Council's mission remains vital, and many of the issues we are addressing today are becoming ever more urgent. We must leverage for economic impact and national security the revolutionary technologies that are disrupting the economy, business, markets, jobs, geopolitical shifts, and global competition. We must hone our competitive edge in the face of an increasingly aggressive, ambitious, and assertive China. We must expand the footprint of economic opportunity to engage Americans being left behind due to the lack of education, skills, and access. And we must increase sustainability in all the ways to ensure that we use our planet's precious natural resources for generations to come. 1 year ago, the Council's flagship National Commission on Innovation and Competitiveness Frontiers released its first report, Competing in the Next Economy, which details these critical challenges. The Commission put forth a set of concrete recommendations for the new administration, Congress, governors, and other critical stakeholders across America to address these challenges and to capture the opportunities of a new age of discovery and innovation unfolding before our eyes. In the past year, the Council was called upon by the Biden administration, senior members of Congress, and their staffs to provide policy guidance and bring a powerful multi-sector and private sector nonpartisan voice for charting the path forward for American competitiveness. We worked with the staffs of Senator Schumer and Young in developing the bipartisan U.S. Innovation and Competition Act. The Council leveraged the power of being virtual to engage with other key leaders on the Hill, including House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer and Senators Tim Scott, Chris Coons, Mark Warner, and their personal and key committee staffs. This strategic engagement has brought to the forefront of the Washington policy conversations key commission recommendations on technology statecraft, early stage investment and commercialization, and the primacy of science-based decision-making, among others. And with our longstanding COC member and partner, Panch Panchanatham, confirmed last year as the new director of the National Science Foundation, we work to secure passage of the U.S. Innovation and Competitiveness Act that will open up a new era for NSF and expand collaboration with industry and our national labs. This groundbreaking act establishes a new director for technology and innovation, authorizing some $29 billion over the next 5 years for R&D, innovation centers, academic technology transfer, test beds, scholarships, and fellowships. Over the summer, Council Chairman and CEO of Bank of America, Brian Moynihan, welcomed U.S. Secretary of Energy Granholm and U.S. Secretary of Commerce Raimondo to the summer meeting of the Council's Executive Committee and National Commissioners. Secretary Granholm outlined the Biden administration's aggressive, important climate goals and her vision for the role innovation will play in achieving them. She encouraged the Council and our national commissioners to continue to educate Congress on the importance of infrastructure, the work of our crown jewel national laboratories, and how they are contributing to the development and deployment of clean energy technologies, as well, of course, as the exponential technologies of supercomputing, quantum platforms, AI, the convergence of biotech and materials in partnership with academia and industry. Secretary Raimondo discussed Department of Commerce efforts to boost U.S. competitiveness through talent cultivation, R&D investment, and technology deployment. And very importantly, expanding the footprint of innovation ecosystems across the country, with the department launching major new investments for strategic partnerships for place-based innovation to bring new parts of the country into the innovation ecosystem. To further the Council's outreach to our members and policymakers, the Council launched, in partnership with Lockheed Martin and our National Commission, a series of webinars on cutting-edge topics, including sustainability, pursuing innovation with purpose, beyond digital manufacturing, addressing the benefits and challenges of scaling digital manufacturing, and the future of technology, which looked at the potential implications of revolutionary converging technologies now beginning to scale and those emerging on the horizon. Importantly, these public-private policy discussions set the stage for introducing new ideas that will shape the second phase of the National Commission as we move into 2022. The Council this year also launched our new monthly newsletter, Compete, Council Compete, which highlights new members, upcoming programs, events, and member activities. And as called for by the commissioners at our launch meeting in August of 2019, the Council has made great progress in our social media campaign that features key competitiveness themes, highlights of our findings, and promotes the Council's recommendations. As Council President, I have further amplified the work of the Council and our National Commission through my monthly Forbes.com column, focusing on critical competitiveness issues and priorities. The Forbes column has attracted thousands of views and now serves as a digital platform to promote key Council priorities and findings, such as investing in the nation's innovation infrastructure, the need for a national strategy to secure and lead in advanced microelectronics and next generation manufacturing in America, how the economy reorganizes and transforms work when disruptive technologies scale, and the need for a new strategic U.S. global technology statecraft as a top foreign policy priority, an imperative that was acknowledged by Secretary of State Blinken in his Global Technology Summit speech earlier this year. In concert with the work of the National Commission, the Council turbocharged our engagement through our longstanding flagship initiative, the Technology Leadership and Strategy Initiative. We brought key government leaders to conversations with our members, including Dr. Victoria Coleman, the Chief Scientist at the Air Force, Dr. Vanessa Chan, the Department of Energy's Chief Commercialization Officer, and Dr. Heidi Shyu, the Undersecretary of Defense for All Research and Engineering and Chief Technology Officer for the Department of Defense, who, by the way, highlighted the Council's Next Economy report in her Senate confirmation hearing. These leaders all emphasize the evolving strategic challenge the United States is facing and the urgent need to accelerate U.S. technology development and deployment, and to utilize the pivotal role of CTOs across all organizations. The Council's University Leadership Forum, bringing together our preeminent university presidents across the nation, is actively engaging as well on these critical competitiveness issues through the lens and perspective of higher education. The forum issued two major statements outlining steps colleagues and universities can and should take to address research security and to champion the importance of building sustainability and resiliency of the research enterprise as pivotal to U.S. competitiveness. The University Forum's agenda and invitation to collaborate were welcomed by the Deputy Director of the White House Office of Science and Technology and the Department of Justice team working on academic security and foreign influence in the context of the U.S. research enterprise. Moreover, with planned boosts in STEM education and training, the forum is developing a video campaign on a very important issue the Council has long championed, namely the importance of merging the STEM, the liberal arts, humanities, social sciences for a 21st century education and to prepare the next generation to compete and prosper in the global economy. Looking beyond our borders, the Council has had a remarkable year with its international engagement and collaboration around the world. The Council continues to serve as the Secretariat and on the board of the Global Federation of Competitiveness Councils, an organization we founded over 10 years ago to be the world's premier global network and collaborative platform for sharing knowledges and practices on competitiveness policies and strategies, and every year issuing a powerful statement of global principles on what drives competitiveness. As the GFCC marked its 10th anniversary of our Global Innovation Summit last week, during a virtual summit chaired by the GFCC chairman, Chad Holliday, and throughout the sweep of the pandemic, the GFCC launched major new thought leadership initiatives, including its Frame the Future initiative, addressing global competitiveness through the converging lenses of innovation, sustainability, resiliency, inclusiveness, and partnerships. Looking to the future on the Council's 2020 agenda, we will reconvene and reinvigorate our commission working groups that worked so hard during 2020 to support the work that led to the Next Economy report. We're going to start working and developing new thought leadership, new research, and deep dives into critical issues such as the future of sustainability writ large, particularly the sustainability of production and consumption, and the emerging new economic metrics and performance standards that will drive investment and performance in the clean energy economy. The future of US leadership in advanced microelectronics, and the resurgence of a US-based electronics manufacturing capability. Place-based innovation to expand the footprint of innovation-driven growth across the country and bring more regions and more diverse Americans into the innovation systems that determine our future. And we will continue to work and have deep, deep dives into the future of work that has been radically transformed during the pandemic, but ever more so with the rapid adoption of the accelerated technologies of autonomy, of robots, artificial intelligence, all permeating every sector of the economy. As the Council's board and executive committee has informed the Council, we will work to advance what we learned during this unprecedented period of challenge, turbulence, and disruption over the last almost 2 years. Here are some of the key learnings that we really will bring to our work. One, our nation was put to the test, and that yes, we revealed economic and competitiveness and resiliency strengths, but also brought into stark reality were many of the foundational and systemic weaknesses that we must address with new, innovative, inclusive solutions. We learned that our supply chains are fragile and fracture under pressure. All businesses and the government working together must find ways to ensure the integrity of supply chains for critical goods, to better manage big swings in supply and demand, and to turbocharge our efforts to harden cyber infrastructure from malicious, ongoing, accelerated attacks. The digital divide is a digital disaster for many in our nation. The world is moving to online platforms for knowledge, work, accessing job opportunities, education, and all services. Yet too many Americans in rural areas and low-income communities do not have such access to the digital future. The Council applauds the recent passage of the bipartisan infrastructure legislation that contains billions of dollars to address this problem that, again, mirrors in many ways our quest and success in achieving literacy in the United States. We must achieve digital inclusiveness and access as well. We also learned that businesses, universities, and government can innovate much faster than we ever thought possible, transforming the manufacturing, their organizations, work processes, and quickly deploying new technologies than ever before. And that in the new public-private partnerships, particularly those addressed in the pandemic, we saw a partnership that enabled regulatory reform and to streamline and actually get rid of obsolete regulations that have been slowing down innovation and impeding our ability to bring new products and services, and in this case, new vaccines to the market. We must extend and apply the lessons we learned about agility for a world that promises to be ever more turbulent, for technologies that will be ever more disruptive, for a whirlwind of creative destruction, and again, for this change that's occurring at accelerating pace. And as the council, the commission, its members, and our extended community open the next chapter of our critical work, it is imperative that we meet the challenge of bolstering the capabilities, the sustainability, and resiliency of all of our businesses, large and small, our research and educational institutions, and ensure that we can empower our society to have strength, resilience, speed, and agility for them as individuals and as regions and communities to compete in the next economy and to have the tools they need for a prosperous future. Again, on behalf of the council's board, our members, I want to thank everyone that's going to be joining us today for their contributions and for participating in our virtual National Competitiveness Forum. We have an incredible lineup of inspiring leaders from industry, academia, our labor unions, and the national laboratories, as well as distinguished public sector leaders serving our nation, all of whom will help us navigate the theme of this year's National Competitiveness Forum, Future Focus. It is now my pleasure to welcome our first speakers of the day, two incredible leaders at the forefront of shaping America's future and very committed to the agenda and impact of the Council on Competitiveness. Our chairman, Mr. Brian Moynihan, the chairman and CEO of Bank of America, in conversation with our council chair emeritus, Mr. Chad Holliday. Enjoy the 2021 NCF, and we hope very much to be together next year in person for our annual dinner celebration and for our National Competitiveness Forum. Thank you.
Deborah, thanks so much for that introduction and those accomplishments from the council. It's so encouraging to see the recommendations from the commission being taken into account in the infrastructure bill and things such as broadband and also diversity and inclusion, and even some regions of the country pick it up on the council's leadership. Thank you so much for what you're doing. Today, I had the opportunity to have a discussion with Brian, our chairman, about sustainability and competitiveness and how they fit together for him. And so, Brian, could we start it off by just saying what motivated you to spend so much time on sustainability now with all the requirements you have at leading Bank of America and the Council on Competitiveness?
Well, I think, it's been an honor, Chad, and thank you for getting me involved in the Council on Competitiveness, and to learn what it uniquely brings sort of fits up against sustainability very well. But the end of the day, we need to all focus on sustainability because we got to make a just transition. We got to get from where we are today to where we need to be, and we need to do it relatively quickly. And that has to be just across, urban, rural, rich countries, poor countries, the private sector, the public sector, in all dimensions, and oil producing companies and renewable companies and everywhere in between. And so, who better to figure all that out than to have the wonderful combination of what we have in the Council on Competitiveness? And why should this be an agenda item? Energy for everyone. And Chad, we've worked on this for many years. Sustainable energy for everyone means that you can be competitive and grow. And who better than a Council on Competitiveness to help figure out that equation? Because we have research, we have the commercialization research in the private sector, we have labor in the sense that we've got Lonnie in the groups that can help us figure out how to reskill workers to help move from what they're working on today to what they need to work on. And in the end of the day, we got Deborah and the team on advocacy to put forth policies and practices and procedures and investments and incentives that we need from the public sector and the credibility to deliver it. So, sustainability is a huge issue for us to all get right. A just transition is a requirement. The Bank of America has $1 trillion financing commitment to help that transition take place. We're net neutral on today, and we're net zero by 2050. It's in our self-interest as an company, as an industry, and as all industry to get this right. And that's what I think this is wonderful. And by the way, for America, if we have great energy sources that are not subject to constraint by constraints on emissions, we are going to be in a much better competitive position than otherwise.
Hey, Brian, that's just great. Yeah, I think about the multiple hats you wear coming into this. First from the Bank of America, but chair of the International Business Council, as well as the Council on Competitiveness, and such a major leader in the whole financial sector. What do you think really caused this change now? Why is the interest from your clients and the members of the council really stepped up here in the last couple of years?
Well, I'll speak in particular the private sector, Chad, that you and I've had most of our lives in. So if you think about it, what's really changed is the recognition. If you're running a company, your customers are telling you they need you to make this change because they think it's right for society. The people who govern you, in the governmental side, your investors are telling you that. You all these colleagues on the air here have seen the various shareholder issues and things like that. And your employees are telling you that, frankly. And so you're doing it because it's the right thing, but you're being pushed and moved faster by all those groups, society, government, your shareholder, your investors, your bondholders, and everything, and your employees, which is important because we want to be a great place to work. So that's one thing. The second thing, I believe the private sector has to lead this. Governments have an extreme role in incentives and ways to make things happen, and potentially greasing the skids to for training and things that might have to take place, and the research dollars they give, which are critical. But at the end of the day, the amount of money needed here means the private sector has to make a change, and it's aligning your whole company to that change. And so, in my role in the International Business Council, or in the COC here, or in participating in the Business Roundtable, or the various other things I do, the Sustainable Markets Initiative, which His Royal Highness Prince Charles leads, which is 300 CEOs and a coalition willing, all that is private sector people are committing to it. And I think the easiest way to understand this, when a company commits to net zero, it's committing to tax itself on carbon or emissions until it eliminates them. And how does it eliminate them? It provide or neutralize them. It finds other sources of power. It works on its supply chain. It works on where its products go. And ultimately, when it can't solve all that, and it won't be able to solve it in the near term, then it has offsets that it buys, and those offsets are good. So when we spoke to the G7, I had an honor of addressing this G7 leaders in Cornwall, England. I addressed the G20 leaders in Rome, and sitting there in front of them, I said, "This is the private sector is moving. We're driving it. We don't need any money," and that's comforting to the government's ears. What we need is some mandates to help markets move faster, some incentives to help drive it, the role of the multilateral development banks, especially in emerging economies, to help us differently by ensuring risks we can't take. That's the kind of things in great research funding, which is important to this group. And those are the things we need. We don't need money because we're often moving. If you help us with that, we can even move faster. And so, the idea of all these coalitions of the willing to have emerged is tremendously important. But the base thing people have to understand is the private sector believes in the just transition. It believes it's got to help make it happen. And in fact, a net zero commitment drives activity in the private sector, which then provides commercialization of our research, provides a demand for products that are coming out of this innovation and things like that.
Oh, that's encouraging. And it's nice the way you put the whole package together. But if you look at all those organizations you're a part of, they're all doing great work. What's unique about the Council on Competitiveness and this commission and what it's doing compared to all those others?
Well, this is not only sustainability, but broadly, Chad, when you introduced me this, 6-8 years ago, whenever it was, I wasn't that aware of what it did. And John Collingwood is a great colleague of mine, said, "Hey, you ought to look at this." And Chad, you said, look at it. And I looked at it. But what is unique is this eco structure from, the great research labs and the great universities, labor, companies, and all of us thinking about how we can make America better. And so I think when this organization was born, 40 years ago, whatever it was, 30, 40 years ago, it was about competing with the Japanese in terms of core manufacturing and the ability to do things. You come forward now, it's a different set of issues, but the principle is the same. We have to make America more and more competitive, and we need all those eco-structure people to think through the problems, address the problems, come up with strategies, and work together to make them happen. And then we'll be more powerful, whether it's intellectual property to, how do we commercialize research, to how do we have certain policies, to favor certain technology development that can't happen in a pure private sector, how we develop new markets as a financing company. I think the COC just has unique aspects, and from what you described to me, what I see today, late now as chairman, it's been true through Deborah and the team do a great job, and Chad, but it's bringing it all together, and that requires, frankly, all of us that are members to make that happen, because there's only so many people at the staff. It's our job to make it come together.
Oh, that's a great summary. My experience has been just like yours, but it's so unique having leading companies, great research universities, and organized labor all in the room together. And as you know, we have some great discussions. But at the end, the things we can agree on are really powerful. And I think that's why we see the administration adopting a number of the things we see. Ronnie, as you look at where we are today, how far are we on this journey? Are we just getting started, or are we well down the road?
Well, in terms of the sustainability journey, I think is what you're talking about.
Yes.
I think the big change, I went to COP26, Chad, as you mentioned earlier, we were talking. There's been 25 of them. This is the 26th one. It's the first one I've been. And when I looked around, all the colleagues over there, and what John Kerry did with a group and Mark Carney and the GFAN's commitments, and you think about all the work that went into coming together. It's not because COP26 occurred, because that's 2 weeks. It's because the private sector has fundamentally decided to push here because it's the right thing to do. And that's what I think is different. So we're on the journey on commitments and attitude, and we got to make this happen. We got to be a just transition, fair to oil companies, fair to new energy companies, and everyone in between, all that type of things. It has to work for everybody. We have to have energy for countries to possess. I think we're in the 7, 8 on the commitment side. Unfortunately, we're in 1, 2 in terms of getting stuff done. And the link between those two is the hard research and technology and commercialization and understanding it and government policies. And that's where the COC helps link this together, and labor to help retrain this, reskill the capabilities of our labor to make this happen. People have to change what they're going to do. We all know that. We change all the time and across the board. So I think that COC has a wonderful position, but I'd say attitudinally, we're closer where we need to be. Execution, we just got to keep going. And I think when you have a good attitude, the execution can follow.
Well, that's a great summary. So for everybody participating today, the rest of this program is going to be fantastic. It's just going to build up that what Brian and I've been describing to you. I think you'll find it very useful. Thank you for being a part of it. Look forward to working with you at the COC.
Thanks, Chad.
The Council on Competitiveness is privileged to welcome the Honorable Jennifer Granholm, U.S. Secretary of Energy, for remarks on the future of energy, food, and water.
Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to join this year's National Competitiveness Forum. So back in July at the Council on Competitiveness summer meeting, I spoke with some of you about the Department of Energy's role in bringing President Biden's ambitious clean energy agenda to life. So much has happened since, including, of course, the historic passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law. That is a massive achievement for the cause of clean, affordable, reliable, resilient energy. That bipartisan infrastructure law is going to help us modernize our grid. It's going to shore up our domestic supply chain for electric vehicle batteries. It's going to commercialize essential next-generation technologies like clean hydrogen. It actually positions the United States to build the clean energy economy that we know that we need and lead a global clean energy market that's going to reach $23 trillion at a minimum by the end of the decade. This is a race. And while the bipartisan infrastructure law puts us in a great starting place, if we want to win, we need the second piece of President Biden's Build Back Better agenda. I know that the support that many of you showed for the bipartisan infrastructure law helped deliver it to the White House for the president's signature, and I thank you so much for making your voices heard. But I also want to tell you that there's more work ahead. The last few months have made the strongest case possible for building out as much clean energy as we can and reducing our reliance on fossil fuels as quickly as we can. So Americans can't afford to keep getting swept up in the volatility of oil and gas prices. Energy is simply too important to every part of our lives. So our goal has to be to grow the pie and to grow it clean. Make no mistake, this effort is underway. I've spent much of the last 6 months traveling the country, and I've met with staff at our national labs who are developing clean technologies that are going to be the envy of the world. I've seen clean energy companies based in Europe and Australia setting up shop in Rhode Island and Tennessee. And I've learned about American businesses in solar and EV production, expanding operations with plans to employ hundreds of people. I've witnessed partnerships forming to leverage steel out of West Virginia for wind projects off the coast of New York. And I've talked to workers that have been eager to get in on the ground floor of new industries that are primed for takeoff. Just yesterday, the White House convened a group of businesses, philanthropy, labor leaders who are answering the administration's call to help transform fossil energy communities into clean energy communities. So they rolled out plans for projects that have ranged from solar and hydrogen power to thermal energy storage and advanced nuclear demonstrations, along with a commitment among philanthropies led by the Just Transition Fund to raise $100 million over the next 5 years and maximize the impact of these investments. So collectively, these efforts that were announced yesterday hold the potential to create tens of thousands of jobs. And this is just the beginning. That's why there's so much buzz around clean energy opportunity. And the full scope of investment within the Build Back Better agenda can bring that buzz to a crescendo. Once those of you who are in the private sector hear it, we need you to get involved. We need companies competing for funding on demonstration projects and deployment efforts. We need you applying for loans on large-scale energy infrastructure proposals and taking advantage of tax credits for domestic manufacturing. We need you creating jobs, especially in those fossil energy communities that have powered our country for a century, and those who have as well borne an undue burden of that fossil energy legacy. Two kinds of communities. That's how we'll build a better America. That's how we'll free the American people from volatile energy price swings. That's how we're going to make our air cleaner and our communities healthier and our people wealthier. And it's how we will ensure that America can compete in and lead the 21st century global economy. And it's how we'll put the entire world on the path toward a more sustainable future. So let's get to work. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I'm really pleased to have a conversation with two of the world's most thoughtful and impactful leaders examining one of the world's most crucial innovation challenges and opportunities. That's the future at the nexus of energy, food, and water. First, we have joining us Dr. Renee Lammers, the Executive Vice President and the Chief Science Officer at PepsiCo, and one of our national commissioners serving on the Council's National Commission on Innovation and Competitiveness Frontiers. And we're also joined by Dr. Robert Johnson, the President of Western New England University, and also one of our distinguished national commissioners. Thank you both for being with us this afternoon, Renee and Robert. And let's just dive right into this very complicated and very broad topic. And I'd like to get your insights on how the United States can leverage and engage this innovation space for long-term competitive advantage. Now, we all know water's properties are useful for things like producing energy, and energy is required to treat and distribute water for human use and food and agricultural production. And yet, one of the greatest challenges that we're facing lies really at the very nexus of this energy and food and water equation. And we know that due to population and economic growth, global energy use is going to soar and could soar nearly 50% by 2050, driving further rise in energy-related carbon emissions. And by 2050, we may also need to produce anywhere from 60, and some say even 100% more food to feed a world population approaching 9 billion. And today, globally, we already know that 72% of all water withdrawals are for agricultural use. but billions of people today live in areas that are already experiencing water shortages and even water stress. So Renee and Robert, I'd like to ask you, as you look into your own crystal balls, what innovations are emerging that could enable greater sustainability in energy, agriculture, and food production without inducing further water stress? What new solutions are emerging? And Renee, perhaps I could turn to you first.
Thank you, Chad, and thank you for having me. It's a broad topic indeed. I think there's a continued and collective drive from all actors across the value chains to create more from less. And some great examples are getting commercialized of using resources more effectively and with greater efficiency. Maybe, examples like precision irrigation is one of them. And I think technology innovations that get connected to improved agricultural management systems will add further in value, such as precision irrigation tools I just mentioned, in combination with, let's say, scheduling tools that are tailored to crop water needs, for instance. So driving layered solutions creates larger impact, as does integrating these solutions. So it's sort of technology layering, if you like. And forgive me to be a little bit specific, but PepsiCo, company I work for, develops its own potato varieties for a brand you may all know, Lay's. And in the 10 years from 2011, we have successfully elevated yields such that we can reduce farmed acres, save water, reduce inputs, and remove energy demand from the system. And in water use alone, our varieties return a saving of more than 7 billion gallons annually as a result of those breeding and commercialization efforts. Yeah. So I think innovations that are connected across variety, production practices, and farming systems are a powerful way to move the needle on more from less. This means better varieties that need less inputs, crop management tools that predict or forecast what crops will do, and when inputs are needed, that will further optimize production and minimizing waste. I think these innovations are starting to add value. Back to you, Chad.
Renee, Robert, before I turn to you, Renee, just a quick question. I'm intrigued with tech layering and the example you gave around potatoes. And I'm wondering, are you learning lessons from that potato example that you're beginning to scale in other product lines or in other parts of your business?
Well, maybe another example I can give in terms of the innovations I just mentioned. For instance, oat is another crop, which is an important crop for us for our Quaker brand. Mm-hmm. And as an example of how practices can be used with varieties to deliver better outcomes is what we call the Opti Oat platform, which is actually a digital crop intelligence platform that can identify fields that support higher protein outcomes in the grain without more nitrogen fertilizer. So it's sort of these digital solutions that we are increasingly seeing also using across our broader crop system, if you like.
In addition to what Renee just spoke to, and thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this panel with Renee. He is such a thought leader in this space. One of the things that comes to mind is artificial photosynthesis, the storing of energy from sunlight. And I think that creates enormous possibilities when you talk about layering technology one on top of the other. It creates tremendous opportunities from an innovation perspective. And to the extent that we can figure out ways to democratize that, if you will, in creating an ecosystem within regions, instead of the importing of virtual water, if you will, which I'll speak to more later in our session, I think creates tremendous opportunities. I think carbon capture systems, storage systems, for example, would be another example of innovations that can provide us this unique way of utilizing water in a more efficient way, because food and energy do compete with one another for the utilization of water. And it is a very, very fascinating phenomenon when you think about it. And the water is limited when all is said and done. Those are a couple of thoughts that come to mind right off the top of my head.
Well, Robert, I'm going to push you there. You ended on the point about limited water, but you teased us with this idea of virtual water. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what you mean there. And then I wonder if I could open up to both of you around this concept of democratizing these technologies and innovations and what you see that process looking like in encouraging and driving U.S. productivity, U.S. innovation, U.S. competitiveness.
So when you look at the inequity of food and agriculture across the globe, there are regions and parts of the world where we have people who are consuming more food than their fresh water system allows them to produce. So as a result, they import their food. When they import that food, one of the things that comes from that is that the water that was produced to produce that food, say in the United States, to ship it to some other part of the country, there was water utilized. So virtually they're using water from another part of the planet so that they can consume more food than they have fresh water to produce in their own region.
I think that democratization is an important point, and I think, and I don't know whether we're going to discuss it on the next question, but I think also how we are going to move the agenda forward, I think it's important. The collaboration piece, I think, is something we should dive a little bit deeper in, maybe in your next question. Chad. Yeah.
Well, let's do that. Renee, you've sort of foreshadowed what I think I wanted to get to. I'm sitting here in Washington, D.C. today, and we know we're all following around the country the actions of the Biden administration and leaders on the Hill that are looking at planning significant expansion and investments related to clean energy and other measures to improve our sustainability. And so I'm wondering if both of you, from where you're sitting, whether regionally or within your own organization, what do you see as being a key leverage point for investment in this nation to ensure that we achieve the greatest gains to meet the challenges that you've all described, actually the opportunities you've described, if we really address this intersection of energy, food, and water?
So, as I think about it, I think wind power is a frontier and an opportunity for the United States. Being here in Massachusetts and us being right off of the coast, down in the New Bedford area, and of course, all and up and down the eastern seaboard, wind energy and wind power and the power of the sea and other renewable energies as well create tremendous opportunities. Of course, solar power and hydropower as well. And I think that creating a different kind of information highway with grids for electric vehicles all across the country is going to be essential, because we have to move away from fossil fuels. Someone who grew up in Detroit, when I think about 25 gallons of gas going into an SUV utilizes enough water, if you will, that could feed and grow food for one person for an entire year. It says to me we have to do something different.
That's an incredible equation. Renee, any thoughts or reactions to what you heard from Robert or some of your own?
I totally agree with Robert just said. I'd like to take it in a slightly different direction in terms of to truly enable, I think, these technology solutions and address those complex challenges at this nexus you just described. I do believe that we must take a systems level approach and embrace the notion of new partnership models. So this is more about a how,
Yes.
Creating new knowledge tools that activates R&D is key. And that means being more agile in operating in pre-competitive spaces that activate benefits through value chains. Expanding public-private partnerships will be key, and creating focus on problems and federate knowledge into the hands of those who can innovate different solution sets. So after all, we're likely to need many solutions to tailor unlocks in different environments and localities, and even in new supply models. I also think we should not only focus on the what, but on the how. And I just give you an example of that. And hey, listen, we have a very modest example of what we do in our own industry. We worked with Corteva, one of the best agri-science companies there is, and we actually sequenced the full oath, the genomic code of the oath, and we put it out there in the public domain, so that other people can actually benefit from it, from that knowledge that we put out there. So it's also a how rather than the what. I have one specific plug for where we should probably put a little bit more investment, and that is around basic food science. I do believe that is an area where we still have very significant unlocks to go for and to go after, and a step up in investment in there would be highly appropriate in my humble opinion.
Renee, thanks for that. Well, I love this idea. We began with the why, and we are ending with the hows and the what. Robert, any last word before we wrap up?
I think that smart farming is going to become more and more important. And I think that to the extent, I know we have big farms, mega farms all over the world, but if we begin to think about this very, very fundamental principle of agroecology and creating ecosystems with local farms in various regions all across the world, we could literally improve the yield anywhere from 50 to 100% and consuming significantly less water. And if we think about doing things of that nature, the world will be a better place. We have to democratize this back to the very, very basic levels wherever we can, using smart robots, if you will, to do farming and agriculture. And that's not to take away from the big farms, but we can't continue to utilize virtual water across the globe.
Robert, Renee, I want to thank you both for sharing your ideas and solutions, really at the heart of this very intricate equation, as we talked about from the beginning, of energy, food, and water. And I know as we look forward to 2022 with our National Commission, I look forward to working with you both on unpacking more of these ideas. But thank you for being with us today at the National Competitiveness Forum.
Thank you,
Chad.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joan Gable, president of the University of Minnesota and University Vice Chair for the Council on Competitiveness. In just a few moments, I'll be joining Lonnie Stevenson, president of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, for an important panel on the future of learning, skills, and work. But first, I have the distinct honor and pleasure of introducing someone who really needs no introduction. She was described by the New York Times as a former prosecutor with made-for-state fair charms, to Vogue magazine describing her as personable, popular, and pragmatic. We all know Senator Amy Klobuchar from her reputation of putting partisanship aside to help strengthen our economy and support workers, businesses, and innovation. In 2019, an analysis by Vanderbilt University ranked her as the most effective Democratic senator in the 115th Congress, and I can think of no one more effective around what the Council on Competitiveness does or what it aspires to do. I know her personally as an effective difference maker on behalf of Minnesotans, and I know many others who were introduced to her during her run for president in 2020, and also by the integral role that she played in the planning and coordination of the inaugural ceremony for President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. Among her duties there, she provided the welcoming remarks at the ceremony and introduced the newly sworn-in president for his inaugural address. But here, you'll get to see her today as our funny, brilliant friend, advocate, and I think you'll see the side of her that allows her to share her bold vision for competitiveness in the future in the United States of America. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Senator Amy Klobuchar.
Thank you, Joan, our University of Minnesota president, for that kind introduction and for all you do for our state. I think you know how much I love the university. My dad, a proud graduate, my husband, a proud graduate, and I can hardly think of any institution that does more to keep our state competitive than the University of Minnesota. I'd also like to thank Deborah Wynn-Smith and Brian Moynihan for all they do for the Council on Competitiveness. We're here to talk about the future, because the choices we make today are going to determine America's place in the global economy in the years ahead. That's why we need big economic goals and a bold vision for sustained growth for generations to come, a competitive agenda for America. We need to be a country that makes stuff, invents things, and exports to the world. So I am laser focused on moving our economy forward by making progress on the fundamentals, innovation, infrastructure, and bringing down costs, all of which will help us grow. I think with the pandemic, we all see the light at the end of the tunnel, or more aptly, as the Duluth mayor has said, we see the lighthouse on the horizon. So this should be a moment in time that we think about the next big thing and all the bold things we have to do to compete in the international economy. Let me start with infrastructure. From the highways and bridges that connect our cities to the ports and railroads that connect our supply chain, to get the stuff to market and really compete internationally, we've got to have an infrastructure system that's for this century, not the last one. High-speed internet that lets businesses reach customers. As you know, we just made a huge once-in-a-generation investment in our future by passing the bipartisan infrastructure law. I was especially focused on that last issue I raised, and that is high-speed internet broadband. That's a bill I lead in the Senate. Representative Clyburn leads it in the House, and it basically was included in this major bill. So this process wasn't easy, messy. You know a little bit about that in academics. President Gable, things aren't always easy, but after a lot of long negotiations and late nights, I'm proud that the legislation was ultimately supported by every Senate Democrat and 19 Senate Republicans. Here's what the bill means: fewer potholes, more reliable Wi-Fi, safer bridges, less traffic, high-speed internet for every American who currently lacks it. Importantly, it also addresses the root causes of some of the supply chain issues that have come into focus in recent months. These are things that can't be ignored when you look at, and they have been ignored for years, even before the pandemic, when you look at what's happening, right? If we want to increase our competitiveness, we need to update our ports, our freight rail. We can't have miles of lines of empty cars waiting to be filled. Another big part of this legislation is creating a lot of good paying jobs, an estimated 1.5 million jobs per year for the next 10 years to be exact. And if you're doing the math in your head right now, you probably can, or that's why you're involved in competitiveness policy. You're probably thinking that means we need a lot more workers because we don't even have enough for certain jobs right now, and you're right. So that gets us to the second big question and challenge we're working hard to address as we look at our competitiveness. How do we put people back to work and have people go into the jobs that we need? So here's what I think. One, we need to help Americans access apprenticeships, skills training, and community college so they can prepare for this century's jobs. Two, we need to make sure moms and dads can access affordable childcare and help for aging parents so they can return to the workforce. We've lost a whole bunch of people, as you know, during the pandemic, and so far, many of them gone back, but not all of them. We must finally pass immigration reform, especially when you look at things like tourism and agriculture, where we just don't have enough workers, particularly in some of our rural areas. So, what's the answer? Well, rebuilding our workforce is about increasing wages. Yes, some of that's going on right now, but it's also that apprenticeships, education, and training people for jobs. How I like to talk about this is, so we don't have a shortage of sports marketing degrees. Congratulations to all who've gotten them. But we have a shortage of plumbers, electricians, healthcare workers, computer programmers. Earlier this year, the Senate passed legislation, it's called the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act, that makes a historic investment in STEM education. This is going to go a long way toward protecting our innovative edge, but we can't stop there. We have to take a wide-reaching approach to workforce development. A 2019 study by the Midwest Economic Policy Institute found that every dollar spent on apprenticeship programs in Minnesota increased my home state's GDP by 21 bucks, meaning apprenticeships are an investment we can make not just in workers, but in the economy too. That's why I have been focused on this. Senator Collins, Republican of Maine, and I introduced the American Apprenticeship Act, and Senator Moran of Kansas and I also introduced another bill, the Apprenticeship to Colleges Act, to help more people get the skills they need to work in high-demand industries. Now, what's right on our plate? I think you know. You've heard the words, Build Back Better, also known as BBB. Great marketing idea. No, whatever. Build Back Better Act. Okay, so what that does, right there, right in front of us, is to make the most significant investment in skills training in community college in generations. When we get this signed into law, I know these programs are going to make a world of difference for our economy, businesses, and our workers. I've seen this in my own family. My grandpa worked 1,500 feet underground in the iron ore mines in northern Minnesota. He never graduated from high school. He was helping to raise his brothers and sisters. He was the oldest boy. There were like 9 of them, as well as my dad and his brother. So my grandpa, he did well when he was in elementary school and middle school, but he had an obligation. And so what he did is he went to work every day, went down in that cage in that mine with this black lunch bucket that my grandma would pack for him. And he saved money in a coffee can in the basement to send my dad to a 2-year community college. My dad graduated from Vermillion Community College, which was then known as Ely Junior College, and went on to earn the last 2 years his journalism degree from the University of Minnesota. He went on to be a sports reporter, a newspaper columnist. He interviewed everyone from Mike Ditka to Ronald Reagan to Ginger Rogers. When he retired in 1995, he had written 8,400 columns and about 12 million words, and was voted the nation's most outstanding columnist in 1984. Community college, with his own dad not even getting to graduate from high school. My sister, she didn't graduate from high school either. She had some issues in high school. She went on, she worked in manufacturing. This story is repeated a lot in our country. Then she got her GED. And what did she do then? Once she was comfortable with getting that GED, she went to a community college, got her 2-year degree, went on to get a 4-year degree, and ended up getting that year the highest scores in the accounting exam in the state of Iowa, and she's been employed ever since. Those are stories that still resonate today with so many families. Every person in this country deserves that chance. Every person in this country deserves that chance. And by making sure Americans can find apprenticeships and afford skills training in community college, we can make sure that they get a fair shot. Next, we have to look at how we get people back to work. Because as I noted, the pandemic's taken a significant toll. Now, you may not know these numbers. Tragically, nearly 200,000 working-age Americans have died from the coronavirus. 200,000 working-age Americans, and 5 million of the workers left the workforce as a result of the pandemic. Some have retired, aren't coming back, but many could. On top of that, the lack of accessible, affordable childcare, which was a problem way before the pandemic, has had a particularly pronounced impact on working moms, 1.6 million of whom have struggled to return to the workforce as a result. If you don't have childcare for your kids, but you want to go back to work, you're probably not going to go back to work if there's no one to watch your kids. Since this pandemic began, moms and dads have been balancing their toddlers on their laps and their laptops on their desks, teaching their first graders how to use the mute button, something they do better than senators for the most part. And people are really frustrated. They've gone through a lot. I know you know it from the workplaces that you're in. And when I've traveled across my state, I've heard from parents in rural, suburban, and urban areas that the cost of childcare is stopping them from returning to their jobs. Right now, we have the opportunity, really, of a legislative lifetime to offer a life raft to every family who has struggled with how to balance childcare responsibilities against paid work. It sets a limit on what percentage of your income can go to childcare, 7%. That's in that Build Back Better bill, along with help with aging parents and bringing cost of prescription drugs down and the apprenticeships I just talked about. So I'm working with my Senate colleagues on this bill to make sure it's going to happen. Of course, to truly address our workforce shortage, and this is my final point on this, we've gone through, getting the people the training they need, giving the people the help so they can go to work, whether it's aging parents or childcare. But we also need immigration reform. Our broken immigration system is hurting our economy, and we simply can't afford to shut out the world's talent. Just look at the Fortune 500 companies. Almost half of those companies were founded by immigrants or children of immigrants, including Hormel and 3M in my home state. More than 30% of all U.S. Nobel laureates were born in other countries. And think about all the immigrants who are now working as construction workers, healthcare professionals, other frontline employees, often in rural and underserved areas. I have worked on immigration issues since I came to the Senate in 2007 when Senator Ted Kennedy asked me to work on immigration reform. And I was part of the successful bipartisan effort to reform the immigration system bill we passed out of the Senate in 2013 unfortunately died in like John Boehner's freezer somewhere over there in the house next to the frozen peas, never got anywhere. But this is literally our third and biggest moment. We passed a bill in the House before. We passed a bill in the Senate before. All these efforts have been bipartisan. And while we continue to work on broad-based immigration reform, and of course we had some headwinds when President Trump was always against moving forward on it, we can still do everything we can help for businesses to find the workers they need right now. That's why I have pushed to make progress on this issue. I support giving undocumented immigrants the certainty they need to live and work without fear of deportation. And there are ways you do this, that you make sure that people that have not committed crimes, that have been in this country for a certain period of time, you can have them on a path to citizenship. You can give them work permits meanwhile, to make sure that we are using the workforce that we have and can get. The other piece about it is visa changes and making it easier to move bills and to be able to make sure that we have more help to get more workers in this country. This is what we have to do to stay competitive. Immigrants don't diminish America, they are America. We know there are hardworking people in every corner of our country and around the world. We have to make sure that they get in the jobs we have. I think now's our time to focus on this competitive agenda, to build 21st century infrastructure that meets the demands of the 21st century economy, to expand our workforce with talent both here and abroad, to make sure we have true competition by doing something about consolidation, which is a whole nother story for another day, but you can read my book, Antitrust, to strengthen our entire economy by making sure our workers are ready for the jobs of the future. Now's our time, and we have to rise to the occasion. I want to again thank the Council on Competitiveness for offering me a chance to speak today. Enjoy the rest of the event. You deserve it. Happy holidays.
Good afternoon. I'm Bill Bates, Executive Vice President with the Council on Competitiveness, and we're now going to continue our conversation on the future of learning, skills, and work. I'm honored to welcome the Council's Vice Chairs for Academia and Labor, Joan Gable, the President of the University of Minnesota, and Lonnie Stevenson, the International President of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Joan, Lonnie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
As you know all too well, globalization and rapid advancements in disruptive technologies are affecting the workforce, creating new opportunities for jobs, but also hardships for a lot of workers. Today, such impacts on the workforce are coming at a rapid pace and honestly are likely to accelerate in the years to come. That means that individuals, companies, unions, educators, trainers have less time to adapt and prepare than they might have in the past when technology cycles were a little longer. So what I want to do is start with this question for the two of you. Given the rapid pace of change and the technological disruptions to many sectors of the economies, what do you see as some of the emerging skills needs for the coming decades? And Joan, maybe I'll start with you and then you can kick it to Lonnie.
Well, thank you. And it's nice to see everybody. So when we think about the higher ed role, it can range anywhere from a very specific set of technical competencies that some of our colleagues offer to a very broad set of thinking or critical thinking competencies that are more the focus of some of our higher ed institutions. But if we were to look at higher ed across the board and synthesize all of that, then we think about being educated for the future means being prepared for jobs. It's not just that jobs are changing, it's that the job that you'll have 10 years from now probably doesn't even exist today, or the sector that you're working in now will be fundamentally different or be one that doesn't exist today. So how do you teach for, prepare for that kind of future? So from a higher ed point of view, we look at technical skills and making sure we remain current. And obviously we're very dependent and grateful for partnerships like the one we have with unions, with industry sectors, with state governments, with the federal government on that technical skills training. But we also look at human training, the ability to be adaptable, the ability to critically think, the ability to be innovative, the ability to lead, the ability to follow sometimes, as the case may be, and so that you can be prepared to pivot into something for which you may not have the basic technical training. And then, of course, we're looking very much at data and big data and that side of technology, because that's clearly driving a lot of this innovation. And with that, I would love to hear what Lonnie thinks of this.
Thank you, and thank you, Joan. It's a pleasure to join you in this conversation as well, and also with the Council on Competitiveness. You know, from the point of view of blue collar workers in the construction, there's no doubt right now that, you know, with the recent passing of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, that there's going to be tremendous job opportunities all across the country as we continue to build out that infrastructure. And it's going to really mean millions of new jobs. But same thing, the industry has changed tremendously in construction overall, and particularly for the IBEW and electrical workers on both our construction side of the house and our members that work in utility. And so, you know, we're constantly updating and changing our training that we provide through our apprenticeship programs and our journeyman training to continue to, as the new technologies come out and new challenges that we have to provide services to the customers, that we're able to provide those services and be trained, have our members trained and ready to do that work. And so we're excited about it. We see a lot of opportunities and a lot of challenges, but I think it's really going to be an exciting time for several years to come as we really rebuild the infrastructure of this country, which is sorely needed.
Lonnie, as you look at those updates to some of your training regimens that you mentioned, is there sort of a set of skills that you're really seeing are needed now or in the next 2 to 3 years that you didn't see maybe 10 years ago?
Yeah, I can tell you it's our trade. I'm an electrician by trade. And when I went through my apprenticeship a few years back, things are completely different. And I remember when I first went on the job, the first journeyman I worked with told me, says, one thing about this industry, kid, is you're never going to quit learning. There's always new ways of doing things, better ways of doing things. And so I've watched that over the years, and I see the tools that have emerged that are available for our workers now, you know, and the materials, how the materials have changed and the installation of things. And, you know, how much that truly is there. And that's why we continue to do the training, you know, computer training. I didn't ever think I'd be doing anything with computers when I went through my apprenticeship, but it's pretty commonplace now for electricians and linemen and everybody else to be doing a lot of electronic things. In fact, a lot of their training is done electronic as well. Linemen, for example, if we're testing and learning how to hook up transformers, high voltage transformers, we now have mock-ups where they can do that, you know, in the comfort of their home on a computer screen. And if they hook up the wrong wire and they see a big explosion, it gets instant feedback that, hey, I didn't do that right. And of course, we'd rather have that explosion on a computer model than out there in live circumstances. But so some great opportunities. Like I said, the tools and materials are constantly emerging all the time. And so we have to stay on top of it.
Great. Thanks, Lonnie. Joan, you know, thinking about the university system and obviously your own university, how is it evolving a little bit to address some of these skills needs? Maybe the same sort of question, how you thought about it 10 years ago compared to how you're thinking about it today?
Well, there's really two major changes. There are lots of other changes, but the two big ones are, first, as Lonnie describes, our use of technology to deliver content is very different today than it was 10 years ago, and it'll be different again 10 years from now. And also learners have a different expectation that they're expected to be able to access information and content over the course of their life, as Lonnie was saying. So the idea that you're done learning when you get your degree or your certification is becoming a very dated concept. And so we're evolving to meet that with a different type of embracing of the technology so that we can really think of how technology allows you to learn in ways that you couldn't before. And I think Lonnie's example is perfect, that it's not just that you're looking at a classroom through your computer screen, although we certainly do that, but it's that you can engage in certain types of learning that didn't exist until we had access to this technology. And that allows our students to do things that they couldn't do. It allows them to spend part of their day in applied experiences that they may not have had time for. It allows us to extend the model of learning well into adult life, which is how students are reframing. The average student's 30 now, rather than in their mid-20s, the way they were approximately 10 years ago. So higher ed is, meeting the moment, meeting the student, meeting the learner where they are, and leveraging their changes and the changes in our own tools in order to be able to serve them well.
I want to touch on one other topic here because it's a popular one in the media, especially, which is the acceleration of automation. We're talking robots, machines, sensors, whatever it might be, that are increasingly capable of doing what we might consider routine tasks that have in the past made up many, many jobs for lots of workers. How can governments, companies, universities, unions prepare students and workers to sort of retool and address this challenge that's being brought on by increased and increasingly smart automation? Lonnie, do you want to take that one first?
Again, as things continue to go in the automation, we're seeing, even in construction trades, because some of the automation, for example, I've seen where there's actually a robot that can lay block, like you got a typical bricklayer, where it can be on, and they've got there and they're putting the mortar across there and, and laying the block and it's pretty amazing. And some of the things that they could do, and even on the, the people working out, not in a controlled, say maybe in an industrial plant or something, auto workers or others, where we're seeing more and more robotics and skills that's even able to be worked in the construction industry. We're seeing more and more of our work being done off-site and what we call prefabrication. So as much of the work that we can do and have less workers actually on a construction site, where they can do that in a controlled environment, running conduit, getting wire pulls and things like that we do in our industry. We're seeing more and more of our contractors moving into that type of environment. And be quite honest with you, many of our customers are starting to demand that because they don't want to, it's less opportunity for accidents. Construction's still a very dangerous occupation. And so if we're able to do that work in controlled environments and, maybe instead of having 800 electricians or other construction workers working on top of each other, if we can do that in other areas through prefab and automation of the tools that they have in those prefab environments is huge. And we're seeing a lot, we're moving into that very quickly.
Great. Joan, thoughts on that?
No, Lonnie is obviously the expert on what it would mean from a hands-on or applied point of view. And then from the teaching side, it's to continue to develop the ability to be innovative, to lead, to adapt, and also to do the research on the robots themselves and develop them in ways that comes from human capital. And we're a big part of that part of the conversation as well.
Really important point. Thank you so much. And I see that our time is up. I know this was a quick conversation, but I really appreciate everybody's thoughts and insights and the time that you gave us today. So I want to thank you to my two panelists.
Thank you.
And wish everybody a terrific afternoon and a rest of our session.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm David Wilson, president of Morgan State University here in Baltimore, Maryland. Morgan is Maryland's largest HBCU, historically Black college or university. We are a high research university, having been in existence since 1867, more than 150 years ago. There was a huge debate that raged here in Maryland 150 years ago, and it was around whether Blacks actually should receive liberal arts degrees. There was this notion that African Americans did not possess the intellectual ability or the rigor to actually pursue those degrees. But the founders of Morgan State University, those visionary founders, did not accept that notion. They saw a future of learning, a future of skill, and a future of work that included all of Americans in all disciplines, not just the privileged few. And so today, much like, believe it or not, 150 years ago or so, we find that visionaries like the founders at Morgan brought into existence so many institutions with that same kind of mindset. And now we are all but overwhelmed by the urgent need to think like that again. Yes, so many of you, like me, were interrupted by the announcement of the discovery of the Omicron variant. To state that the world was caught off guard and simply unprepared for the arrival of COVID is a vast understatement. But educational systems were simply not prepared. Institutions were equally unprepared for the swift transition to online and remote environments. As an HBCU president, I am so grieved by the impact that COVID has had on public schools, which largely serve poor minority communities, many of those communities from which we draw students. And those schools are already under-resourced, even prior to COVID. And so now those students who have been without this kind of face-to-face rigorous learning for 2 years, how would these students perform academically for generations to come? How would these students develop socially? How would they catch up after these 2 years of inconsistent touch-and-go instruction? Oh yes, how will we ensure that these students are equipped with the skills that they need to enable this nation to be ever so competitive? And so I would just like to close my remarks by taking us, if you will, to 2050. 2050 is only 31 years or so away, 30 years or so away. When we look at 2050, we have to ask ourselves some big questions. And those questions are, what would this nation look like? Well, one thing is certain, our nation will be much, much more diverse than it is now. And we look around and we see the type of innovation that is currently taking place. We see the type of research that is currently taking place. And there are all kinds of predictions that are looming large for 2050. Predictions like quantum computing, for example, that it will power all of our computerizations from data analytics to digital entertainment. Even our food supplies are predicted to be stabilized by 3D printed meats and robot harvested crops. And even the development of robots is taken on such proliferation that the research has shown that robots could almost by 2030 have human-like functions. And so as we look at 2050, I think it is critical for us to ensure that we are educating all of our populations with the degrees that they need, with the skills that they need, so that they are in alignment with the work of the future and the future of work. We need to make sure that disciplines like cloud computing and embedded systems and cybersecurity, Internet of Things, that these disciplines and the skills that come out of them are being reached or actually being embraced by all of the population. I think that if we don't pay very careful attention, much like the visionary founders of Morgan and other institutions like it did 150 years ago, to ensuring that all of America is equipped with the tools that they need to help this country be competitive, we will not have the innovators in 2050 to lead the world as we do today. This, to me, is our great calling. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Deborah Wynn Smith, delighted to welcome you all for this very exciting discussion on the future of learning, skills, and work. I want to thank you, Dr. Wilson, for framing this very important dialogue that's so critical to the future of U.S. competitiveness and prosperity. I'm delighted that this session is going to be moderated by the Council's Executive Vice President, Bill Bates. And again, very pleased to welcome Ms. Randy Weingarten, the President of the American Federation of Teachers, AFL-CIO. Randy's a longstanding member of the Council's Executive Committee. Thank you, Randy, for your tremendous leadership. And I'm very excited also to welcome Ms. Janet Fouty, the Executive Chair of the Board for Deloitte, U.S., and one of our distinguished commissioners of the Council's National Commission on Innovation and Competitiveness Frontiers. I'm very excited as well to announce and share with all of you today, on behalf of the Council's Board of Directors, that our Executive Committee has formally elected Janet to serve as our next Vice Chair for Business. Janet, we look forward to continuing our deep work with you and the entire team at Deloitte for supporting the mission and the initiatives of the Council on Competitiveness to advance competitiveness for all of our citizens and our leadership in the world. Thank you so much, and let's go forward with a great discussion.
Good afternoon. This is Bill Bates, Executive Vice President with the Council on Competitiveness. I'm excited now to continue our conversation on the future of learning, skills, and work. I am honored to be joined by two of our executive committee members, Janet Foudy, the Executive Chair of the Board at Deloitte US. Janet is also a member of our National Commission on Innovation and Competitiveness Frontiers. And Randy Weingarten, the President of the American Federation of Teachers, AFL-CIO. Janet, Randy, thank you so much for being with us today. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I want to jump right into our first question if I could. What do each of you see as some of the critical emerging skills that are needed for students and workers for the jobs that our current economy is creating? And Janet, if I could turn to you first.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Bill. And it's great to be here with you and Randy today. I want to start with the frame that I think is, from a business perspective and an industry perspective, is the most important, which is that the pursuit of technical excellence alone is really no longer enough. We certainly have seen through almost every dimension of our society that the uncertainty of the future with emerging technology means workers really need a mindset of both constant curiosity and this what's next mindset. So organizations, education systems, and government have a critical role to play in this developing talent and this mindset shift that's so critical. From my perspective as a leader of a professional services organization, and we do think of ourselves as a great incubator of talent, I do believe that business has a really important role to play in deep collaboration with the broader ecosystem of both education and government and more broadly. There's two things in our Human Capital Trends Report, our 2021 Human Capital Trends Report, that I wanted to just share very briefly. The first is that organizations will be able to thrive in uncertain futures, will design work in ways that engage workers. And that really has not been at the centerpiece of how organizations have thought about work. And the second is that we believe a movement towards worker empowerment is really needed to unleash potential and build resilience. And that is all rooted in adaptability, reskilling, and new roles as some of the most important things that we continue to hear from executives and from our clients in terms of the things that are the most important. So that's my really quick spin through, and I'm really looking forward to what Randy has to say on this important question.
Janet, I think you've just said, what I would actually have said about it. People need voice, people need agency. So, the skills, and I started as a social studies teacher, and I'm really glad to be here with you, Bill, and with you, Janet. So I started as a social studies teacher, high school social studies teacher. So I'm always thinking about how kids have confidence, confidence to learn, confidence to be able to get up after they failed. So confidence, resilience, critical thinking, life skills, the sense of curiosity, of ingenuity, of wanting to learn more, wanting to figure it out. So these kind of critical thinking, life skills, confidence, curiosity, how do we make school joyous and interesting so that somebody wants to come back over and over again? So project-based instruction, career technical education, all of these things teach critical thinking, teach confidence, teach life skills, and the resilience that Janet just talked about. But the glue is how you make sure that people have agency and empowerment. And frankly, that's part of the reason why I think unions are on the ascendancy again, and why workers actually really want unions, because they want to make sure that they have a process by which to have that kind of empowerment and voice that Janet was talking about.
I guess and Bill, we'll give it back to you in a moment. I know we've got a little bit of time here, but Randy, what you want for your students is exactly what we want in corporate America and in government in terms of mindset and critical thinking. So I couldn't be delighted to hear sort of how much intersection there was between how we've been thinking about this.
And I know you have another question, Bill, but I think it's really important for business and public education to work together. The apprenticeship programs that you have in the trades kind of put all this together. But take a school like P-Tech, or take other career tech schools or other partnerships with business that have 6-year associate degrees or have certification programs and then an ability to at least vie for jobs. These are ways of actually building in not only all this mindset and all these skills, but also showing kids, young adults, a career path to a good job with decent benefits. So we have to work together in kind of worker circles to be able to make sure that kids see this from junior high school to high school, and that business actually sees that they have kids or young adults who can start at a job day one. In some ways, what government should be doing, and I know this is the next question, is that government should be taking over some of the training costs that businesses now have to pay. And if we did through these kind of partnerships, it would actually reduce the cost that business has and the cost that government should be doing in terms of public institutions.
We could keep going, but we're going to try to let you take control back over here.
No,
Bill.
no, that's fantastic start to the conversation, and I don't want to interrupt, but let's build on the point that Randy just made, which is when we think about adaptability, critical thinking, these skills you just both talked about, do we have the institutions in place, and what do those institutions need to do, whether it's government, as Randy was just talking about, or companies or unions, to get us to that finish line that you're speaking about?
So I do want to take a giant step back and be super clear that for business, talent is the dominant issue, and that hasn't been forever, but where we find ourselves today is this workforce that we've just talked about is the number one issue in any conversation you have with the CEO, both attracting, recruiting, retaining, and developing talent. We haven't talked as much today yet about how we build a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce. And the issues that Randy so well highlighted, I think, are even more exaggerated when you talk about racial diversity and, frankly, gender diversity as well. And if we had more time, I would share with you some of my favorite stats around the incredible delta there is in the business community in and around the opportunities for our diverse citizens as well. I want to focus on the things that I think business can do, which is we have to be, and I appreciate the comments around the role of government, Randy, but I do believe where we are today is that business has to invest in helping with a robust and early pipeline in skill and curriculum and career path development across a really broad set of the talent pool, and not just sort of how we historically think about, in my industry, about four-year colleges, how we invest in helping think about curriculum, and then putting that not only in conversation, but into action. And I certainly know that our foundation, which I have the privilege of chairing, is really focused on how we drive STEM curriculum and agendas all the way down to junior high. So that's just a quick example, as well as some of how I and we have been thinking about this topic.
So I would say that this is a great way of unions in business and public education, K through higher ed, to collaborate together. And so, part of the Build Back Better initiative is to create some of the funding opportunities in order to do these kind of things. But I would add one of the stats that's really surprising to anyone who hasn't heard it is that the modern career and tech ed schools, 95% of kids graduate. And we're talking about majority Black and Hispanic graduates going into lots of different industries, from apprenticeship programs to coding to cybersecurity to the food industry. So this is not your granddad's CTE. This is not your granddad's voc ed schools. This is a way that business and unions and public education can really cooperate and back map to make sure that kids who have a sense of what they want to do and how to thrive, the skills and knowledge that they need. So what government can do, like with the Perkins money, with the apprenticeship monies, they can help facilitate. They can help make sure the matches are done. But Janet is quite right. We need to make sure that businesses know that there's talent out there, just to mold that talent and to go as far as early as we can in terms of high school and junior high school.
I appreciate both those answers, and thank you so much for your time this afternoon. This has been a very fast 10 minutes, but a really great conversation. And I want to thank you both for joining us this afternoon. And I hope everybody has a terrific afternoon the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
At Lockheed Martin, we're on a mission. Your mission. Not just the next mission, but the one that's 2 steps ahead. The one that depends on solving problems before they happen. Our mission is to prepare you for the future by engineering advanced capabilities today, so that you can protect what matters most. That's why we've not only taken the lead in hypersonics, but we're helping you integrate that technology faster than ever. It's why we're not only developing the laser weapon systems you'll need, but deploying them in the field. It's why we've coded cyber readiness into everything we do. It's why we created Orion, the only spacecraft that can take humans to the moon, Mars, and beyond. Why the next generation fighter is ready to help you protect the generations to come. And why we've already built autonomous technology and artificial intelligence that advance human ability. The multi-domain battle space of the future is already here, and there's no time to waste. No time to play catch-up. New age threats require new age capabilities, and that's why, at Lockheed Martin, our mission is to build the integrated solutions you can depend on. Because the world is depending on you.
Hello, I'm Chad Evans, Executive Vice President of the Council on Competitiveness. And few topics have been in debate as much this year as the future of the U.S. research enterprise. And we're really honored to have with us this afternoon at the National Competitiveness Forum 3 national and really global leaders who can help us navigate the pathways that they see emerging for strengthening the bedrock of our country's innovation capacity and competitiveness. We have Dr. Kimberly Baddiel, the director of Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, Dr. Michael Crow, president, Arizona State University, and Holden Thorpe, Dr. Holden Thorpe, the editor-in-chief of Science Magazine. So Kim, Michael, and Holden, one of the, I think, lessons we've all learned during the COVID-19 pandemic is that businesses, universities, and even our public sector are creating and scaling new innovations and making transformations on timelines that are perhaps much faster than previously thought possible. And in fact, it was this demonstration of unprecedented speed and agility that prompted the Council's National Commission on Innovation and Competitiveness Frontiers to really challenge the country, challenging the country to achieve a 10x, a 10-fold increase in the rate of US innovation. Why did we choose that goal? Well, the Commission found that accelerating research and innovation would be vital to a future shaped by a whirlwind of change brought about by the convergence of revolutionary technologies and, of course, global hypercompetition. I want to dive in now. From each of your perspectives, what must the United States do, and how does our research and innovation system need to change to make a much higher level of speed and agility the standard for U.S. research and innovation? And Kim, I wonder if I could start with you, and then Michael and Holden, I'll turn back to you for your thoughts.
Thank you, Chad, and thanks very much for the opportunity to participate today. From my perspective, the pandemic has really highlighted for us how we think about risk. Mm-hmm. What is risk, and how do we measure and balance risk against potential opportunity? And so in the research ecosystem, when there's no driving demand signal, when there's no crisis imminent, it's easy to fall into a pattern of incremental advances and to try to buy down upfront the risk of these bigger ideas and potential game-changing technology pathways. And so reimagining that calculus and saying, minimizing risk today is actually increasing risk for the future. Can we better manage risk? I'm not saying have a free-for-all, but think carefully through what success looks like and take potentially bigger steps up front. and really incentivize that in the way we fund and manage research in this country. I think that's going to be critical.
You know, that's a really interesting point, Kim. It makes me think of one of our former vice chairs from Johns Hopkins University, a cardiologist, you know, talked about if we don't better manage risk, and in his case, he noted we would have never had cardiovascular surgery. So we can't be completely risk-free. Otherwise, that's the antithesis of innovation. Michael, you want to jump in here, and I'd love to hear also from Holden.
Yeah, so I agree with the things that Kim said. And I think what I would add, if you really wanted to accelerate innovation in the United States, we've got to become less simple, less simpleton-like, where we think that innovation is all about Silicon Valley, or we think that it's all about some narrow set of activities. What we need is, you know, unbelievable innovation environments, creative environments throughout all of the communities, making it actually more of a national thing. You know, I don't know why we don't see that if we could be the best boat designers of the future of watercraft, you know, or the calculus involved in the development of something that's a whole new industry. And so what happens to us is that we become, in my view, overly obsessed with one narrow niche of microelectronics or a narrow niche of defense, some kind of defense establishment oriented innovation, all of which are needed and all of which are essential. So what we need is, how do we say that we're not going to be a fully innovative society? We're not going to get a 10x outcome unless we've got all the communities around the country involved, unless we think about innovation and call it innovation across all kinds of things. You know, new ways to create linkages between technology and art are innovations also that could be very powerful in the economy. And where are our centers that drive all of that? Well, there's a few. And so, you know, I'm not trying to be Pollyannish in any of this. I'm just trying to say that the way to think about stimulating innovation is to make it a national project, not a Route 128 Silicon Valley replication project, because that's never going to happen. Those are two unique places, but 100 of those places, and then 1,000 of local communities, and then 10,000 groups of folks that are working together. That's what we've got to figure out how to do. And then I'll say one other thing. I think we've made a huge mistake by suggesting that only research universities drive forward innovation, and the other 1,000 universities out there are not a part of that process. Well, they should be made a part of that process down at the community level. So those are two things. If you really want to scale it, that's what we need to do. We need to actually scale it. And so I would throw that into the mix of things for people to think about.
Well, Michael, I'm struck because I've heard you speak many times on this eloquently, as you've done just now, this idea of systems of innovation, not just one monolithic system, as if that's going to be a silver bullet for our future. And I think you're beginning to help us think about, how do we change our mental map? How do we really think differently about how do we define and even talk about innovation? And Holden, you know, you're editor-in-chief of Science Magazine. You're hearing from the best minds, not only nationally, but globally, about the future of science. What you've heard from Kim, Michael, any resonance, any additional thoughts you want to throw into the mix?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what has been said about broadening the definition of who participates in all this. And another way to broaden it is for the venture capital industry to lose a lot of their bias about who they're going to invest in, which they tend to do largely on personality, and start doing it on the substance of the science and innovation instead. Mm-hmm. You know, we saw with the mRNA vaccines, you didn't hear all this commentary about, are these people good at giving a PowerPoint? Are they selling the sizzle? I mean, the mRNA stuff was passed over for years. Yeah. Why? Because they never hooked up with someone who was a CEO type that met the emotional and comfort expectations of the venture capital community. The venture capitalists need to start funding substance and stop funding style. That's a provocative thing, but I'm an opinion columnist, so there's an opinion for you.
Yeah, just on that, by the way, so what Holden's talking about, the mRNA example is a beautiful example of where fundamental chemistry is what really underpinned all of this and led to all these kinds of things. And you don't even hear the innovation system even described. You don't know that both of the mRNA vaccines came from academic laboratories who were supported by government and academic chemists who had been doing research for over long periods of time. People don't even understand the process. So I'll just add that people need to become less ignorant about the process.
And they need to stop saying things like, we want a CEOs of force of nature.
I don't care if the CEO is a force of nature. I want technology that works.
I feel compelled because you've hit on something I think is really important. There's a mythology around venture capital in the private sector that's the place where these problems are being solved. And it's not. It's the nexus between that sector, the public sector, research universities, national labs, this broader ecosystem that Michael described is really essential to that because each of them operate on a different time scale. So if you didn't have decades to think about mRNA vaccines, we would not have them, right? So thinking broadly, thinking differently, and understanding the natures of partnerships and collaborations is really important.
Related to that, we're just too, sorry about this, Chad, but we're just exactly to Kim's point. We're too obsessed with the superhero, the superhuman. That isn't even how this stuff works. Even our stories about these people are false. They're incomplete, at least. And so it's really being able to embrace innovation in every community. The Italians, by the way, were first masters of leather and then masters of shoemaking and then masters of boot making and then masters of plastic ski boot technology and then advanced technologies, all coming out of the same communities. We wouldn't even see that as innovation, but it is. And it's a tremendous thing. So we're just goofy about this stuff.
Yeah, it's just time. This is a great time to retire the superhero myth from innovation. I mean, look, some people would have said Mark Zuckerberg was a superhero, and look how disastrous Facebook has been for the world.
Or if he had at least finished college, he holds up this model that not finishing college has made him into like some sort of superhero genius. I actually wish he understood the social implications of the technology that he helped to develop, but he didn't. There's not even a complete process there. Not to pick on him, but it's just a superhero thing. It's just a bad idea.
Well, he's a product of the system. It's not just him.
I want to get your opinions on just one last point because you've talked about embracing innovation, debunking conventional wisdom in a variety of ways. We have a moment in time right now with policymakers on the Hill to perhaps pass transformational, generational legislation to improve our research enterprise. Could you each in a lightning round give me your priority that you think needs to be addressed on Capitol Hill and with the administration?
Just in a lightning round, I mean, they need to realize that the same old model that's been in place for 75 years has been tremendously successful until it's not, which is now. And so what that means then is that we need new models, new structures, new ideas, expansion of the idea of NSF, expansion of the way that people advance things. And so what we need is the same idea, new models, and we need it now.
Just stop pouring money into the same old labs from the same old people who mostly look like me. It's just got to stop.
So agreed. So I'm glad I'm at a same old lab, but I don't look like you. So we're off on one good point. I think those are both excellent points. I think people need to become less ignorant about what the system actually looks like right now. Some of the legislation that's been bandied about suggests folks in Congress don't even understand how the government funds science or where the innovation is taking place. And so first, understand the system a little bit. And then, as you both said, break that model down, decide what the outcomes are you want, and then try to build programs that incentivize those outcomes instead of just pouring the same money in the same spigot.
And just related to that, Kim's own lab, I mean, here it is, an unbelievable world-class research facility that's controlled in a bureaucracy that tightly focuses it down one pathway. How can these labs be freed to become not only their mission-seeking, problem-solving group, but also a network center node connecting in hundreds or thousands of other groups to make things happen. So,
panelists, I want to thank you, for all of your provocative thoughts. You've also teed up conversations that will occur later in the day around the power of place-based innovation and rethinking boundaries in a lot of ways. So from the Council on Competitiveness, thank you for being with us for our 2021 National Competitiveness Forum. The Council on Competitiveness is pleased to welcome now a series of tech and innovation deep dives from leaders across our community, shining a light on the future of technologies at the heart of long-term productivity and inclusive prosperity. The future of energy from Mr. Greg Hill of Hess Corporation. The future of cybersecurity and resilience from Mr. James B. Milliken of the University of Texas System. The future of semiconductors and advanced materials from Dr. Om Nalamasu of Applied Ventures and Applied Materials Incorporated. The future of sustainability and the circular economy from Mr. Nolan Pike of Electrolux North America. And we'll begin with Lockheed Martin Corporation's Ms. Bryn Watson, who'll share insights on the future of digital manufacturing. Good afternoon, Chad Evans, Council Executive Vice President here, and I'm really pleased to introduce a leading voice on the future of innovation in America's advanced manufacturing sector, Bryn Watson, the Vice President of Digital Innovation and Implementation at Lockheed Martin. Now, Bryn, whether we call it Industry 4.0, smart manufacturing, or digitally enabled manufacturing, I think what we all know is that a new phase of the digital revolution is already underway. And perhaps one of the most significant trends that we see in this phase is that multiple advanced digital technologies are converging simultaneously on the manufacturing sector, radically transforming the way that we conceive, design, make, and then ultimately deliver product. And we just have to think about the vast deployment of sensors, intelligent controls, cyber physical systems. And we also know that frontier technologies are emerging today that will drive even bigger change tomorrow. Quantum, virtual extended augmented reality, AI and machine learning, and all of these are going to couple and make manufacturing ever more intelligent. And we also know that this convergence is already beginning to deliver a mosaic of powerful capabilities, from predictive maintenance to real-time visibility on supply chains, and of course, to designing virtually thousands of features before a prototype is ever cast or made. Now, Bryn, you're leading all sorts of efforts and advancements at Lockheed Martin in this space. Lockheed Martin is one of our nation's most complex and innovative companies. But my questions to you are maybe a little more simple. What's coming down the road? What do you see? What are the latest technologies that are advancing digitally enabled manufacturing? And what might be their competitiveness implications?
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to join you today, Chad. I always like having conversations with you because I think the work that we're both working on collaboratively is so exciting. And when I think about the journey that Lockheed Martin has been on for the past several years and going into the future, the excitement is, I think, the underpinning of the mosaic that you mentioned. And the underpinning of that mosaic of technologies is the digital thread. So when you think about the convergence of operations technologies and information technology, it really is the enablement of that continuous digital thread from design to production to supporting sustainment in the field. And that's really what Lockheed Martin has been focused on for the last several years in our journey. And the good news is that these technologies exist today. You know, we're already seeing benefits from leveraging the digital thread. In fact, our Aero business area has invested heavily in a capability we call and refer to as Star Drive. And so this corporate, effort for Aero has been focused on re-engineering their culture and their processes to really look at that fully integrated digital work environment, including integrating the product lifecycle management platforms into their resource management and really demonstrating the power of reducing cost through sustainment and enhancing collaboration across their enterprise. And they're seeing huge gains. They're seeing reductions of 40% in the time to generate just their work instructions. And also 35% plus in reduction of touch labor. So those are definitely exciting technology applications that we're already seeing. We're also looking at, within our missile and fire control business area, how can we drive model-based engineering through that product lifecycle, leveraging the digital thread, and making sure that we're looking at instantiating that upfront and standing up our programs, and then seeing results of 25 to 75% reduction in labor as we move towards going into actual flight tests. So really excited about that, Chad. And I think the other area that we're very interested in advanced technologies is leveraging the digital twin. I know you and I have had a couple of conversations over this last year about leveraging the power of the digital twin and really giving that experience of flying before you fly, if you will, for our customers. And so that's where I can see leveraging a lot of our advanced physics, multi-physics based modeling, a lot of our AI ML capabilities that are emerging now in the technology space, and leveraging the power of the data, right, that we have available to all of our teams throughout the design process into manufacturing and sustainment, and how do you use a digital twin to help with the design, but also to help with the sustainment planning as well. So in my mind, digital twin is definitely a new and emerging, and has a huge potential, I think, for our manufacturing teams going forward.
Well, Brent, this concept of leveraging the digital twin, and you mentioned some of the internal competitiveness advantages you're already seeing. And so it'll be interesting to see how the nation also continues to adapt and deploy some of the systems you're describing, and how we might scale that. We just have a minute or two, Brent, left. And if I could just ask you, in this digital world, on this digital thread, what's the power of people there?
Yeah, I think it's exciting, because I think digital transformation and the leveraging the power of the digital thread is unlocking new opportunities. As we think about moving to automation of more hydraulic type of processes and the way we used to do work through automation, but then opening up the power of data analytics. And we have an opportunity for upskilling. We have an opportunity to really drive our digital DNA. And that's something that we're working on within Lockheed Martin. We have created a platform called the Digital Academy. And it's centered on learning paths that we see tied to this new digital future. And so we're empowering our employees to rehone their skills in these new digital spaces, and really fostering a culture of continuous learning. So it has been really exciting to deploy these new learning journeys, if you will, in these new digital areas. And it's really been empowering for our early career folks who are coming in out of college, and really partnering with the folks that have been around a while and have seen how things work, and partnering and pairing them to really drive that culture, like I said, of continuous learning. So all exciting when I think about preparing our people for this digital future.
Well, it sounds like you're creating not only the culture, but the platforms and the systems that will support. And it's interesting how you're bridging the new young Lockheed Martin employee with the wisdom generation that you all have. Brent, thank you very much for being with us at the National Competitiveness Forum, and thank Lockheed Martin for your continued support and sponsorship of the NCF 2021.
Excellent. Thank you, Chad.
Good afternoon, Chad Evans here. I'm really pleased to introduce one of the nation's and really the world's preeminent leaders on energy innovation, development, and deployment, Greg Hill, the President and Chief Operating Officer of Hess Corporation, and one of the Council's distinguished national commissioners. Greg, as you know, energy is everything. It's really the lifeblood of our economy, and our competitiveness can't be separated from the issues surrounding energy. How productively we develop it, how we use it, and of course, how we steward it domestically. And many would argue that nothing is going to impact American competitiveness more in the coming decades than our competitiveness in this space. As one of our former vice chairs put it, because of energy's exponential rise in the coming years, driven by factors like population growth, swiftly developing economies around the world, improving global living standards, but also because of the use of ever more energy dependent and energy intensive technologies. If current trends continue, we are on pace to use more energy over the next 50 years than in all of previously recorded history. So, in this scenario, Greg, I really wanted to ask you first, how do you see technology and innovation affecting the competitiveness of the oil and gas industry?
Well, first of all, Chad, thanks for having me here and for the opportunity to speak, at this conference this year. So let me start by saying, maybe I'm stating the obvious here, but the oil and gas industry has a very long history of using technology and innovation to tackle the enormous challenges and opportunities, some of which you described in your opening remarks. And one great example, I think, is, think about the shale revolution here in the US, where a different approach to horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing really unlocked oil and gas resources that previously were thought to be unlockable. And as a result of that, extreme innovation and technology advancement, the US became a massive global powerhouse in energy in just 10 years and made our country energy independent as a net exporter with some major economic benefits. So between 2008 and 2020, for example, US household energy spending fell by 25%. And even today, US energy costs are about half that of Europe. So it's a huge competitive advantage that was realized as a result of this. And what many also don't realize about that innovation was the massive environmental advantages that were derived from the shale revolution as well. So, since 2000, the US has reduced its energy-related CO2 emissions more than any other country in the world. And then thanks to that growing use of natural gas in the US, our country's CO2 emissions are the lowest levels in a generation. So we are an industry of innovators. Now, if I look to the future, kind of what's next for oil and gas, let me talk about our traditional businesses first. So in our traditional businesses, what we're seeing is the exponential effects of advanced computing power, sensors, and robotics are going to impact our business in extraordinary ways. For example, here at Hess, we're focused on developing autonomous fields. So we're using those robotics and sensors and artificial intelligence to develop, monitor, and maintain our fields, to reduce their environmental footprint, reduce health and safety risks, and at the same time, increase production and lower costs. So that's on our traditional business. If I think about innovation related to climate change and mitigation and the goal of net zero, that's absolutely fundamental for our industry in this transition. We're making a bunch of strides in a couple of areas, in particular methane detection and carbon capture being just a couple of examples. And then there's a third area that we're particularly excited about at Hess, and that is the area of using plant science. We're working in conjunction with the Salk Institute to basically modify crops so that they can store gigatons of carbon in their root systems. Something I didn't know was when you plow up a crop every year, it releases its carbon. What this technology would do would make those root systems wider and deeper, and then enable those plants to store massive amounts of carbon. And to me, that's a great solution, for moving our way towards net zero.
Well, Greg, it's what I think is fascinating. Well, many things about what you said, but you're highlighting the cross-disciplinary, the interdisciplinary aspects of what is going to be driving innovation going forward. And I think what you presented is really exciting. We just have a few seconds left, Greg. If there was one key recommendation you might have for the country looking forward in this era of massive global competition, what would that be?
The world is is facing this unprecedented challenge it's never had before. So we're looking at energy demand that expected to grow, to 20% through 2040. And that is absolutely necessary to enable continued prosperity in the world. We've got a number of people in the world that still need access to cheap, affordable energy. While at the same time, we've got to reduce our emissions footprint, to zero. And so this is a massive, unprecedented challenge that the world has never, ever faced. It's going to require cooperation, as you said, Chad, and new partnerships, massive innovation in technology. Remember, half of the technology to get us to zero emissions so far has not been invented. So, I have, in my lifetime, I've never seen this kind of a challenge presented to the world, where we all have to cooperate together. We all have to change consumer behavior. We all have to invent technologies that haven't been invented to basically solve this very complex challenge for the world. But for the oil and gas industry, we're ready for the challenge. We've got a long history of innovation. and technology. It's gotten the world to the prosperous place it is today. And we're up for that challenge, and we're going to be very much a part of this solution. And, you know, by the way, oil and gas is also is here to stay for a very long time because, of course, hydrocarbons permeate every aspect of our lives. We think of it as fuel in our cars and heat in our homes and things like that, but it's much more. You know, it's pharmaceuticals, it's plastics, it just really, it touches our lives in ways that are not replaceable. But we're up for the challenge and we're ready.
Well, I think not only up for the challenge, but you've also pointed out the opportunity space. So we're excited about that. And Greg, thank you. Thank Hess Corporation. Have a great afternoon.
Okay, thanks, Chad. I appreciate it.
Greetings from Austin, Texas, home of Dell, Oracle, Tesla, and tons of other emerging tech leaders. I'm delighted to join today's important discussion on the National Competitiveness Forum. Thanks to Deborah, Chad, and the rest of the COC team for putting together a great agenda. So the University of Texas System's the largest public university system in the most rapidly growing state in the country, with 6 health science centers, including MD Anderson, and 8 academic institutions led by UT Austin. And like every other organization in the world, we were challenged to continue to operate in March of 2020. And like so many others, we were able to adapt and succeed. Our 240,000 students and over 100,000 employees moved online in a matter of weeks. And despite the fits and starts that all of us faced, we learned how resilient we can be. We graduated 5% more students in the spring of 2020 than the year before, and our enrollments grew over 2% in the fall of 2020. And we did that despite the fact that prior to 2020, fewer than 20% of our faculty had ever taught online, and less than 40% of our students had ever taken a single course online. So how did that happen, Texas and every place else? It's because we had the technology available to shift rapidly. And as a result, in addition, we were successful in educating and graduating students. Our healthcare institutions went from fewer than 1,000 online health appointments in 2019 to over 1 million in 2020. And the vast majority of our workers were working from home. And as everyone in this meeting knows, we will never revert completely to pre-COVID environments. Our country's incredible information technology infrastructure, the state of connectedness of our economy and our society, allowed this remarkable shift. I think it's safe to say we were all more resilient than we thought we would be. Our ability to persist and succeed in the middle of a global pandemic depended on the capabilities of our information infrastructure. And that draws into especially sharp focus the topic for this session. I know that all of us thought many times after March 2020, imagine what this would have been like without the ability to continue our businesses, schools, government, through the effective use of information technology. Our resiliency in one sphere depended almost entirely on our resiliency in another. And while we had moonshot science and medical developments that now allows all of us to be vaccinated and re-enter society, our focus has shifted to the analogous developments in cybersecurity to ensure an environment where not only daily work and societal functions can thrive, but one in which our national defense and our very security depend. The examples of the vulnerability and challenge we face are way too common, from the attack on Colonial Pipeline, which shut down 5,500 miles of pipe and the supply of 45% of fuel to the East Coast, to the malicious codes in solar winds undetected for months and affecting many of our largest and most successful companies and government agencies, to this week's hack, the remote code execution vulnerability of Log4j, an open source software tool that's used around the world in a staggering array of settings. In addition to the commercial breakdowns and financial consequences of the increasing capabilities of opportunistic and creative hackers, there's the even more sobering threat captured in recent journalistic accounts and popular novels on the threat of global conflict, relying on devastating cyber attack. There's no question the threats will increase, driven by criminals seeking financial gain or government sponsors seeking leverage, domination. The only question is how we respond and how quickly we do so. This summer, I had the privilege of joining chief executives from several industries, including leaders of JP Morgan, Bank of America, Apple, Google, Microsoft, including some of the people participating in today's forum at a cybersecurity event at the White House, a summit hosted by President Biden. The fact is that in the US, much of our information infrastructure and the ability to harden our systems and to respond relies on the private sector. And it will increasingly rely on effective collaboration among corporations, government agencies, and our education system. We have work to do, but while our system is more loosely coupled than many of our competitors, that's always been our advantage. There was a sense of shared responsibility at the White House and a number of important commitments made. America's private sector, with the unparalleled capacity for private investment and innovation it can help drive, will be a key differentiator in the new world. But coordinated, smart government strategies and robust, innovative private sector can succeed only if America develops the talent required. Now, like many of you, I've read the estimates of the workforce gap in cybersecurity. The White House estimated there are 500,000 jobs unfilled in the US and several million across the globe. We at least have to double the number of people trained to fill these jobs in the next few years. So this requires a Manhattan Project, a Marshall Plan, whatever metaphor you like, for a massive investment in educating and training and reskilling millions of workers. So using the scale and reach of America's educational institutions in collaboration with industry, we've got to close this gap. This will be done through traditional degrees, but as said earlier today, it will also be short courses and credentials offered in a variety of new ways. One way that we're doing this at the UT system is led by UT San Antonio, where the Department of Energy sponsored Cyber Manufacturing Innovation Institute, or CyManning, brings together leading companies, national labs, and major research universities to help develop secure and efficient manufacturing, bolster our supply chain, and sustain our leadership. In addition, the National Security Collaboration Center at San Antonio brings together major private and public stakeholders to use data and share resources to advance and protect our IT systems. Together with the CyManning partners, who include Carnegie Mellon, Microsoft, Cisco, Oak Ridge National Lab, and the UT system, UT San Antonio is committed to meeting the demand for skilled workers by training 1 million new cyber workers through a variety of flexible credentials. In classrooms, online, and on factory floors, we're providing rapid, targeted training to incubate the skills businesses need, and we plan to do it in just 5 years. And we can't do this with business as usual. 25% of the cyber workforce is female, which limits opportunity and leaves way too much talent on the sidelines. So at the UT system, we're committed to doubling the number of women with cybersecurity credentials and jobs. In addition to the dramatic increase needed in degree and credential production, our nation's research universities play a vital role partnering with the government and the private sector, not only in technology, research, and innovation, but also in legal and policy development. UT Austin's Clements Center for National Security and the Strauss Center for International Security and Law are national leaders in this space, teaching students, conducting research, and convening thought leadership internationally. For instance, the Strauss Center leads a program on technology, security, and global affairs, exploring how the US and other governments' use of new technologies collect intelligence, influence digital communications, prevent extremism, and achieve national security objectives. But cyber threats, like pandemics, respect no borders, and our effectiveness will depend on working with friends and allies globally. An example of this is the UT system's work with Vietnam and other Southeast Asian countries to build cybersecurity capacity through curriculum development and teaching. Our work together with Fulbright University Vietnam and the Harvard Kennedy School is known as the Southeast Asia Cybersecurity Initiative and is authorized by Congress under the National Defense Authorization Act. But these are a few examples in teaching and research and policy development where one university is working. This is something we're going to have to do across the country in all of our institutions with private sector and public partners. My colleagues and I are energized and committed to this work and look forward to being part of this vital national effort. And my thanks to the council for being an important leader in this work. Thank you.
My name is Om Nalamasu. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Applied Materials, and I'm also the President of Applied Ventures, the venture arm of Applied Materials. Materials engineering is the ability to control thin films with atomic precision on an industrial scale. Materials innovations, along with the dimensional scaling, have been the foundational elements of unprecedented productivity gains with semiconductor industry with the Moore's Law. This is what makes it possible for you to have a supercomputer in your pocket and have it last all day on a single charge. Semiconductors are playing an increasingly critical role in the global economy, touching everything from automotive to agriculture to security and global climate change. With the pandemic, there is a new recognition that industrial leadership and economic prosperity are now intimately connected to leadership in information and communication technologies, along with resilient semiconductor supply chains. The need for a coherent global approach to the semiconductor innovation infrastructure that enables continued advances is now. Let me describe a few of the challenges we face as an industry and why I'm particularly excited about the limitless opportunities ahead of us. First, the two-dimensional scaling of Moore's Law has slowed down. The need for improved power, performance, cost, and time to market, however, continue. The solution is to create these tiny nanometer structures in 3 dimensions, whether it is for memory or for processors. Think of this as building skyscrapers in Manhattan versus suburban sprawl. This is only possible by creating and controlling the materials and interfaces of these structures at an atomic level and on an industrial scale. We call this materials engineering. Second, with the world's insatiable appetite for electronics powering everything from data centers to toasters, we must be vigilant about the impact that these devices can have on global energy consumption and climate change. Energy consumption for general purpose computing is growing exponentially, doubling every 3 years. But the world's energy production is growing linearly at only 2% per year. According to SRC, in about 20 years, the needs of general purpose computing alone are going to outstrip the projected global power generation. Materials engineering again shows a path to heading off this scenario. New materials, 3D structures for DRAM and NAND memory, logic, and new device architectures all show promise for energy efficient computing. I'm particularly excited about technologies that enable what the industry calls advanced packaging or heterogeneous integration. That is, putting different special purpose chips called chiplets closer and closer together so that they consume less power and improve performance. Third, while the challenges and opportunities within the semiconductor ecosystem center around materials engineering are the most exciting, I also firmly believe that there are other global inflections that can be enabled with materials engineering. Let me give you one example. Energy storage. Improving the energy density of the batteries simultaneous with reducing cost per kilowatt hour for electric vehicles can dramatically improve adoption of electric vehicles, especially as they approach cost parity with the internal combustion engine. These energy density improvements plus fast charge are enabled through the use of silicon and lithium anodes with materials engineering technologies. There are many more areas where materials engineering can enable global inflections, more than I have time for today, but I would be happy to follow up if there is interest. In summary, while there are limitless opportunities for innovation with materials engineering for semiconductor industry, you can see that these big problems are quite complex and cannot be solved by one company or, for that matter, by one country alone. It requires collaboration across borders based on the rule of law and respect for IP. National support for a pre-competitive coalition of global semiconductor companies, institutions, such as imagined by the CHIPS Act, is an essential element in this effort. In closing, I am most excited about the energy efficient computing driven by materials engineering in building a more abundant and sustainable world. Thank you.
Thanks for having me today. Nolan Pike. I'm the president and CEO of Electrolux North America. Really privileged to talk to the council. Our purpose at Electrolux, shape living for the better. So we really believe in sustainability as a critical part of this. And as a company, since 2017, we've reduced our carbon output by 84%. And by 2030, we'll be carbon neutral. We're committed to this in our use. We're committed to climate neutral operations, and we're committed to the United Nations Global Compact. We think it's a significant importance to be on this journey. And our executive team is incentivized on a sustainable journey. It's so important to our company as our part in people's lives and our part as a manufacturer to really make this journey. But it's really more than that. So one, we want to be climate neutral and drive, a good manufacturing footprint, a good logistics footprint. But it also means human rights, sustainable in our supply chain and throughout the supply chain. It means solutions that go to your home that use less water, that use less energy, that are more efficient, and then more and more circularity. So we can keep appliances, we can keep our solutions in your home or recycle them and make sure they get to landfills and not use harmful materials. But actually, 84% of the impact we make as a company is in how our consumers use the product. So we've divided our company really into three areas: taste, care, how we care for clothes and dishes and after you have a meal, and well-being, which is a lot about air filtration, air quality, keeping you cool safely. So in these areas, we're going to talk and go a little deeper on. We want sustainable eating to be the preferred choice, and we're going to drill down today into food waste, which we think is really an important and significant topic. But also, the apparel industry is environmentally uses a lot of resources as well. So if we can make your clothes last twice as long and we can use half of the detergent, we think that's a very good thing. Actually, it's not a trade-off at all when we do this, because your clothes last longer, they stay brighter, they stay softer. When we talk about food waste, it actually is not just about food waste, it's about better tasting and nutritious food. And then in your home, a lot of people talk about the environment and pollution outside, but what I think very few people know is that your air inside your home is often much worse. And we really want to be a part of helping having better quality air inside the home as well. And then, of course, we support the UN Sustainability Development Goals and the climate targets. Now, food waste. A third of the food that consumers eat is thrown away. And we think that this is a real problem. Our environment's important. We have limited resources. So when we throw away a third of the food, it really doesn't respect the earth. And we think that's very important. But also, a lot of the elements of food waste at the same time deprive the food of nutrition. So when you can store food longer, you make it more nutritious and it actually tastes better. Again, talking about these trade-offs, sustainability and a better tasting meal work really, really well together. And then affordability. The price of food, the access to food, in some areas it's limited. So if we can not waste as much food, economically it's very good for people, and it's also a cause that people really rally around. And it's not a polarizing issue. People don't want to waste. When we talk to consumers, they think food waste is really bad. The Frigidaire consumer and most branded consumers think this is an issue that they expect us to be a part of. Now, the really exciting part for us to be a part of the Council of Competitiveness is we're very, very far down the chain in this cycle. So think about, typically you think about you farm food, you get it to the market, you get it to the grocery store, then you get it to the home. But actually it starts earlier than that. When we're throwing away a third of the food that we have, imagine the raw material that goes into the processing of the equipment, the labor that's required for the just farm equipment and anything that is needed. We're wasting a tremendous amount of resources even before we start to farm. And from farm to preparation to the consumer eating it, we're further down the chain. So what we're trying to do at Electrolux is we want your food to last longer. So we have technology that can store your food significantly longer by keeping the moisture, by getting things like ethylene out of the compartment where you store your vegetables so they last longer, they taste better, and they're more nutritious. We have elements like steam reheat that you can take leftovers that you might have thrown away, and then we kind of regenerate the food by making the rice more moist, by making the pizza less brittle, and then people want to eat that food longer. And then really helping with a whole lot about what you do to reuse meal by meal prep. So these ingredients that you can use, you can make lots of different meals. So we'll assist the consumer in that. But that's fairly far down the chain. So what we'd like to really partner with you on, and members of the council, is earlier in the chain, how can we as an industry understand more about this issue and how we can keep food longer, be more efficient with how we process and distribute, and really tackle this issue. And we think food waste is an issue that's solvable, an issue that's meaningful, and we're excited about working and solving this issue with you. And appreciate being part of this council, and really are committed to shaping living for the better.
It's true. The world has slowed down, but it hasn't stopped turning. It's distanced, but determined. And there, in the face of fear and uncertainty, there's a special breed that haven't skipped a beat. The world's technicians. Skills, effort, dedication, keeping our world in motion when it's needed most. The food we eat, the communities we build, the places we heal, the ways we protect. Their skilled hands, sharp minds, and big hearts keep us on the road and at the ready. It all depends on them. They serve not because they must, but because it's who they are and what they're made of. And we couldn't be prouder to support their heroic efforts, equipping them with the tools they need. Keeping the world moving isn't just their job, it's their purpose. Ours is to help them do it, and it has been for 100 years. Snap-on salutes the makers and the fixers, seeing us through these times. The world couldn't be in better hands.
Good afternoon. I'm Mahmoud Khan. I'm Executive Chairman of Life Biosciences and CEO of the Evolution Foundation. We're going to be discussing today the global challenge of aging and the impact as well as opportunities that this is creating for every person on the planet and every country and society that we know of. Let's think about the magnitude of the challenge. Today, there are more people over the age of 65 on the planet than there are under the age of 5. If you think about the impact of this, the pyramid that we've traditionally thought about with younger people making the majority of the population and older people making the minority is now become vertical, and it is evolving to becoming an inverted pyramid, which means there are going to be fewer and fewer young people taking care of a growing larger number of older people, which is going to demand greater health services and greater social services and financial support. Now, that's if we don't do anything different. The future is not doom and gloom and inevitable if we take this on today. And I'm going to just touch on some of those opportunities, and the rest of the panel will elaborate further. If we don't do anything different than we are today, we cannot financially afford to take care of this population. The 80% of healthcare costs today in Medicare are age-related diseases. As this population doubles and triples, you can imagine the impact of that. No country in the world today has the resources to provide adequate medical care to that population. In addition to this, the need to change the way businesses operate and the way society works is going to be broad. For example, not only is healthcare cost going to rise, but the way we deliver healthcare to a larger population is going to necessitate new delivery models. We're going to have to think about public health as preventive approaches rather than health systems that are interventional for diseases once they occur. The way in which humans communicate between themselves and with machines is going to change. Why? Because as a larger population has impaired sensory systems, visual impairment, hearing impairment, cognitive impairment, the way that human-machine interface happens is going to require new technologies. The future of autonomous or personalized movement is going to change. How we move around the home, how we move from building to building or from our homes to around the city with impaired mobility and all of the disability that comes with aging is going to have to be rethought. Now, of course, that does create opportunities if we think about autonomous vehicles, autonomous devices, small and large scale. Physical infrastructure, the way architecture, homes are being designed are not currently done with the older population in mind, whether we think about staircases, the way a room is designed, the way furniture is designed, the risk of falls, the impact on mobility with depth of vision perception. This is going to need us to rethink infrastructure. Consumer industries are going to be impacted. Food and products that we buy in the supermarket and in stores today is designed today for young, active people for the most part, whether it's the products on the shelf in the grocery store or in the fashion and department store. When you have such a large growing population of older people, they're going to demand products that are designed specifically for them in mind. The way we read labels on a package, the way you open a package, our ability to open. Try opening a food package with impaired wrist or hand movement or arthritis. It is very difficult to do. The distinction between products that we wear and medical devices is blurring. Is an Apple Watch a medical device or a consumer product? This is a distinction only in the regulator's mind today, which means regulatory innovation is going to be critical to start to handle this blurring of the distinction, let alone the thought of who can use this data and who can't. And yet the opportunity exists to diagnose diseases in the community through these devices, such as cognitive impairment, hearing impairment. Early diagnosis of Parkinson's is possible today using a number of these consumer devices, and yet they're becoming medical diagnostics. So those are all challenges linked to opportunities. The future is actually potentially quite bright. With all of this growing population, with the spending power that comes with it, as they remain healthy, as they remain active, they're going to be part of the workforce, either formal or informal, for longer periods if we can maintain health as we age. And that healthy aging results in increase in GDP. Keep in mind, in history, whenever the health of a population is improved, GDP has gone up. There's nothing to suggest that's not going to be true for the aging population as well. So as their health is maintained, they'll be more active. They'll generate more activity, including economic activity. With that will come more jobs for younger people too. And finally, new industries will be thrown out. These industries will create new products, new services. I've mentioned a number of those, but let me finish with one example that comes to mind. The Japanese and the South Koreans are world leaders in robotics technologies that are used in manufacturing across multiple industries. These were actually created predominantly to help take care of their aging population and have now been leveraged to go way beyond healthcare. A number of industries is possible. The question for us in the United States is, do we have the foresight, the coordination, the courage, and the regulatory innovation to actually lead in creating these industries to serve both Americans, but every citizen on the planet, as every human being looks to a future where we're getting older with proportionally more people. Thank you very much. I look forward to hearing the discussion today.
Good afternoon. I'm honored to welcome three of the world's preeminent leaders and thinkers on the future of health. Dr. Victor Zhao, the president of the National Academy of Medicine, Dr. Greg Fenves, the president of Emory University, and Dr. Wayne Frederick, the president of Howard University. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us today. And as we heard from Dr. Mahmood Khan in his framing remarks, we are on the cusp of significant breakthroughs that could extend our health span. That's the period of life spent in good health, free from chronic diseases and the challenges often associated with aging. A range of new technologies, such as new drugs, powerful biotech, engineered foods, and even cyber-physical systems, coupled with a new societal emphasis on healthy habits, are poised to usher in an era of preventive medicine and interventions that could address the maladies often associated with aging, everything from dementia to cancer to osteoporosis, lengthening the time in one's life that's really quite healthy and active. So now, faced with the aging of our population and the potential dramatic increases in chronic age-related diseases and disabilities, as well as unexpected events like the COVID-19 pandemic, what would be the economic and societal return if we made increased health span a true national competitiveness priority? And Greg and Victor, I'd like to turn to you first and perhaps ask you to share examples of some of the cutting-edge technologies and research that are emerging from the current crisis and how those might help mitigate the crisis and prevent future ones. And then Wayne, I'd love for you to jump in as well. So Greg, please, over to you.
Well, thank you, Chad. Our response as a nation to the COVID-19 pandemic is, in my view, the best example of the payoff to the nation and investments in research and development, especially around health and healthcare. Let me give you a couple of examples from my perspective at Emory University. In the news now is one of the first oral therapeutics for treating COVID-19, molnupiravir, invented by Dr. George Painter here at Emory University. It's now been approved on an experimental basis in the UK. An application is pending with the FDA, and the FDA will be making their decision for US use soon. Molnupiravir came from decades of research in virology and antiviral therapeutics. It just didn't come out of nowhere with the COVID pandemic hitting last year. And Emory University, through our science departments, our organizations, but especially a very unique organization called DRIVE, Drug Innovations at Emory, is a place where we can incubate new ideas for therapeutics to combat viruses. And we're looking at how to expand that. What DRIVE does is try to close gaps that make it less efficient to get new drugs, new treatments into the market. And DRIVE partnered with Ridgeback Biopharmaceuticals, a pharmaceutical company, to do the early stage clinical trials, and then with Merck for later stage clinical trials and worldwide manufacturing and distribution. And all of us, Emory, Ridgeback, and Merck, have agreed to join the medical patent pool, international patent pool, to make, once approved, to make molnupiravir available to low-income countries from generic manufacturers while the pandemic is underway. So that's one example of universities and researchers responding to this pandemic. If we go back to the amazing story of these vaccines, again, they just didn't come out of nowhere. One brief story, and I'll finish up. In February of 2020, I was sitting in a conference room at the University of Texas at Austin, and a young professor there, Jason McClellan, in February of 2020, had just created a full 3D structural model of the spike protein. Wow. And he was able to do this because of research that had been taking place for decades at NIH with Dr. Barney Graham Jason had been in Dr. Graham's lab, came to the University of Texas, and had all the capability to be able to understand the spike protein and to be able to create a stabilized version of that spike protein, which became the basis for all the 3 vaccinations that are now available through Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson.
Well, Greg, you're pointing out what I think is a really interesting development that we've all been experiencing is this incredible acceleration of the innovation process. But to your point, that's built upon decades and also billions of dollars of research. And Victor, I'd like to turn to you next and to get your sense of, what would be the returns to our society with even greater focus on healthcare going forward and the lessons that you all are learning at the National Academy of Medicine, but not just the lessons you're learning, the actions that you're driving nationally and globally.
Sure, thank you very much, Chad. And it's good to hear what Greg said about some of the technology that's related to COVID. But if you think about technology as a whole and science, there's huge implications in the healthy aging space. So first, let's make the case for healthy aging. Healthy longevity, I think, has great potential for greater economic and societal return. Most people see aging as less independent, greater burden, greater stress on the health system, workforce, you name it. But imagine that if you can actually make people healthier, more productive, slowing down aging, that has great dividend. There's a study done by Andrew Scott and his colleagues in this year that says that slowing down aging and increased life expectancy by 1 year is worth $38 trillion globally. And in 10 years, 367 trillion. Now, I can't validate this, I'm not an economist, but that's quite impressive. So what am I saying? Well, if you imagine that people are healthier, they're able to continue doing all the things they've been doing, addresses many of the issues about chronic disease, stress of the system, workforce, you name it. And I think this is where science has done tremendous success, as Mahmoud said, our medical sciences. We understand the pathways of cellular aging and cell death. We understand the genomics, the epigenomics, the telomeres, and there are now technology called partial reprogramming that can turn the cell from an old cell to a younger cell. So all that stuff, including work done in my lab, enables the biomedical revolution, if you will, to change the aging process, to make things healthier, not just live longer, but healthier. Second, of course, in digital technology, I mean, we all know this, remote monitoring, right? Alert devices, but now many places have smart homes in Singapore, etc., whereby an older person can effectively navigate around and be productive and mobile. Now that their personal assistants, AI, etc., that can read robotics. And then finally, of course, the social sciences is so important because at the end of the day, the older population, the environment they live in is critically important. As Greg talked about social isolation during COVID, well, the ability for them to be able to improve their environment. So I actually think there's tremendous possibility. One last point. So what we do in National Academy is to create a grand challenge in health longevity. In fact, Mahmoud Khan is a member of our work in what we call roadmap. But the one that I want to emphasize is a global competition. We have created a global competition where allowing innovators, entrepreneurs, scientists to think about this field. I'll challenge Greg. Greg, if you walk down Emory and ask an average person, a young person doing science in biomedical, what do you work on? They say cancer, brain, cardiovascular. Very few people say about healthy longevity. So what we did is we created a lot of seed dollars, Catalyst Awards, and we now have engaged 50 plus countries and territories, putting out these seed awards. Our first round application, we got 1,500 applicants. We funded 150 just to take bold ideas, not like NIH. We don't want preliminary data. We just want bold ideas to give you seed dollars to get started. And it's our hope that they will get lots of really good shots on goal to really make this movement much faster.
Well, Victor, I'm hoping that in hearing you more of the council's members, but also a broader audience will engage even more in that global challenge, because I think to your point, it's global, but if the benefits to the US would be tremendous. And just the quick math, I mean, the $36 trillion or more, it's incredible to think about adding another US and Chinese economy to the global economy. That would be incredible. Wayne, I'd love to hear your thoughts, your reactions to what you've heard.
Yeah, no, I think those are wonderful aspects of what's taking place. What we're doing here at Howard University is we obviously do a lot of research that's focused on the African diaspora. So we're standing up a geriatric center that will actually be focused on the African diaspora, the first of its kind anywhere in the world. And I think it's important as we think of a diversifying workforce who ages and the expanding life expectancy of African Americans, that we begin to understand what that longevity may mean and how it can affect and change the social structure. So as Dr. Zhao pointed out, integrating the social sciences and humanities is a major part of what our center will do as well as we look at that. So we will focus on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and so on, which African Americans tend to be affected at earlier ages, but we also are going to be looking at opportunities for what the impact is that they can have in a positive way around their wellness as they live into ages that we are not used to seeing the African American life expectancy taking them into.
Well, you know, you raise a point that I want to turn to for all of you to consider. Another issue that's really critical to long-term U.S. competitiveness is exactly what you've just identified, Wayne. It's really this wellness gap that we're experiencing. You know, there are wide gaps in life expectancies in different parts across the United States, and as you just pointed out, among different demographic groups. So I'd like to hear from each of you, you know, what are the priority steps that governments, researchers, the healthcare community more broadly can take to really close this wellness gap? Wayne, you've given us a concrete example, but I'd also like to come back to you, Wayne, and then Greg, over to you, and then Victor, I'll ask you to close out on this. I'd like to dig in deeper about what role must the U.S. university play in this ecosystem to drive towards healthier and longer lives? What must the university do? But also, what does it need in order to keep catalyzing the research and the innovation, what the U.S. university is known for?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a great great segue into what I think has been a lost 2 decades. I think for the past 2 decades, we've allowed the American public to become disillusioned about the American university, which still is a major backbone of the strength of the U.S. economy. And as Greg pointed out earlier, we saw that during the pandemic. I mean, you look at everything to do with coronavirus, and you could not get the COVID-19 pandemic, you could not get the appropriate response that you've seen here in the U.S. without great, strong American universities. And I think that there's some key factors that helped us get here and that we must continue. One is diversity of thought. I think sometimes when we talk about diversity, we talk about it in some very staid, myopic lanes. But the reality is we are promoting diversity in our American universities because of the diversity of thought that it promotes. And I would say that's one thing that the American university has to continue to catalyze. So looking at the pipeline from K through 12 and making sure accessibility is broad is key. The second is innovation. And that must mean that we must be closer to industry. And I think that's a critical aspect of what we do. You know, a lot of times I think in our American universities, there's an attitude of sterilization that we're doing God's work, and therefore we need to keep that very isolated. One of the things about the council that I appreciate, and the reason I participate, is because I do believe that industry and our American universities need to be closer, so that as we evolve and as the workforce needs to evolve to meet the competitiveness that America requires, we can shorten that cycle that occurs. I mean, you have faculty members who are teaching something for 20 to 30 years. And so we've been very forceful at Howard University at increasing the kind of engagement that needs to happen with industry. And then the last one is to make sure that we're doing this in a very fiscally responsible manner. A lot of times we talk about higher ed costs, but we don't often talk about the fact that higher ed is actually investing in a lot of R&D. in a way. We don't look at it the same way you may look at it in a pharmaceutical company, but the reality is there's a lot of R&D that needs to go into it. And I think when we talk about our finances and we manage our finances, we need to manage it in a much more progressive manner that makes that argument that some of this is R&D as well.
Wayne summarized them very well. I think that's a blueprint for what American universities need to do to contribute to U.S. competitiveness. I would like to add a couple of things. One is in partnership with the science agencies and the federal government, along the lines Victor spoke of. There needs to be a balanced portfolio of research and support between deep, basic discovery science, but also very innovative ideas that many of them won't turn out to be successful.
Yeah.
Failure is a learning process. It's a continual process. What did we learn from what didn't work? How do we create new ideas? And the tremendous post-World War II partnership between American research universities and the federal government has, I think, gotten a little bit away from the innovation, and that has to be supported. And then certainly, as Wayne spoke about, we also need to be deeply involved with the private sector, because the private sector is what's able to scale solutions, to be able to take risks in looking at new ways of doing things, to be able to allocate capital in ways that universities and research agencies can't do. And then the final point is we also need to be connected to our communities, because we have to build the trust of the American people that the research and the innovation that's taking place at our universities is helping them. And as you started out with your question, COVID-19 has revealed to many Americans the health disparities that exist in the country, that our solutions aren't just for people who might be able to afford medications or go to a doctor or has a personal infrastructure to support their health. And for us to have long-term impacts on American competitiveness and the health of the nation, and ultimately trust in the institutions that deliver this, we have to be serving all our communities.
And I'd like to extend what Greg said in the last comment. I actually think that we need to do more than just research, private sector. It's really a societal issue. And what is the role of university in society? If you look at the gap of 30 years of life expectancy, they are zip code dependent. They relate to the race, vulnerability, and equity. And so this is a fundamental societal issue, in my opinion, that research itself cannot solve unless we bring in the social scientists and everything else. So therefore, university has the ability to bring all the disciplines together and not see this as a health issue alone, but to solve the problem. Importantly, in my opinion, university is an anchor institution in its community. It's able to bring in the resources to address the social and economic disparities in the community. Importantly, university with all its intellect should address the structural racism issue and bring together the sciences that can address this and the evidence of policy that can change things. So my feeling is absolutely research, absolutely collaboration, but importantly, a societal sense of responsibility and a social contract. I just had a paper published in Lancet in October online. I think it's coming out in print this month, that looks at what I say redefining academic medicine. And here we're talking medicine, but I make those points that we're going from bench to bedside to population to society. And I emphasize a society responsibility and what great resources in terms of intellectual and financial resources we can bring to address this really huge problem of inequity that we face in society. University has a big role in this. Thank you.
Victor, Greg, Wayne, thank you very much for being with the Council on Competitiveness and our National Competitiveness Forum. We've learned a lot, doubled down on innovation, but across disciplines and domains, focused locally and globally, but really coupling that to society. So thank you all for your contributions.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
The Council on Competitiveness is privileged to welcome the Honorable Gina Raimondo, U.S. Secretary of Commerce, for remarks on place-based innovation and expanding access and enhancing diversity.
Thank you to the Council on Competitiveness for inviting me to speak today. Increasing America's economic competitiveness is at the heart of our work at the Commerce Department. Our goal is to ensure that our workers and companies can succeed in the global economy. Thanks to President Biden's leadership, we've made incredible progress over the past 11 months. Now, you and I both know that there's so much more work to do. America's ability to compete around the world depends on strengthening our domestic workforce, supply chains, and innovation ecosystem. As part of the American Rescue Plan, Commerce is responsible for investing $3 billion for economic development to support communities affected by the pandemic. And as part of that, for the first time ever, Commerce is launching an initiative to develop industry-led workforce training and apprenticeships, adding extra emphasis on training women, people of color, and underserved communities. We firmly believe that this will directly address some of the labor shortages that American businesses are facing now. Now, regarding our supply chains, I've been pressing Congress to pass the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act, which will invest $52 billion in domestic semiconductor production and create a supply chain resiliency office right here at the Department of Commerce. That office will develop new tools and processes so we can get ahead of future supply chain disruptions. In another effort to increase U.S. competitiveness, Commerce is preparing to invest $10 billion in regional tech hubs across the country. We have to ensure that every American has the opportunity to participate in the digital economy. And through these tech hubs, we're going to unleash the next generation of innovation in critical areas like quantum computing, biotechnology, artificial intelligence. Bolstered by private investment, we can work to close the innovation divide and make sure no community is left behind. If we tap into America's greatest strengths, our talent, our diversity of talent, our world-class universities and entrepreneurs, and our strong public-private partnerships, there is no doubt that we will outcompete everyone. Now is the time to prioritize investments in our domestic workforce, supply chains, and innovation ecosystem, all while ensuring equity. And in doing that, our democracy will be stronger and America will be more competitive than ever. Thank you.
Hi, this is Bill Bates, Executive Vice President with the Council on Competitiveness. It is my pleasure now to be joined by the President of Kansas State University, Dick Myers, for a discussion on the future of place-based innovation. Thanks so much for being with us this afternoon, Dick.
Hey, Bill, it's great to be with you. And I'd like to bring greetings from our governor as well. We were hoping to have her as a part of this little segment, but she's attending some activities around Senator Dole's funeral back in Washington, D.C. right now. So she cannot be with us. But she passes her regards. She knows the important work that the council does. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. Well, Dick, as you know, place-based innovation is premised on the assumption that the unique resources of a region can be a major source of benefit. Universities, as major employers and civic stakeholders, are often well placed to lead and to gain benefit from such an approach. However, we see many communities that are not part of the U.S. innovation ecosystem or part of this thriving high-tech knowledge-intensive economy. Many potential innovators, entrepreneurs do not view themselves as part of this system. Moreover, innovative activities, venture capital tends to be highly concentrated in just a handful of U.S. regions, often on the two coastlines. In short, we are leaving people behind and really just not putting all our players on the field. So I really want to start right there with my first question for you. How do we expand the geographic footprint of the innovation ecosystem and make it more inclusive?
I think that's one of the things here at Kansas State University, being an R1 university. a land-grant university that we think about all the time. How do we expand opportunities for innovation, entrepreneurship, creativity, discovery to all the areas of the state? I think for us, it's capitalizing on what we already have in place. So we're about ready to open a new national lab, the National Bioagri-Defense Facility run by USDA. We've got to capitalize on that and the ecosystem that is growing up around it. We've got to be, providing the kind of research and discovery and creativity on subjects that people care about. And so some of our strengths are around bioagri security, food safety and security, things that are very topical today in the middle of a pandemic. So we need to leverage that, make sure that we have the kind of ideas being generated that people are interested in, and then partnerships and capital will flow. And we've just released our economic prosperity plan for Kansas, which was, we were directed to do that by our Board of Regents. It's a very aspirational plan, which we think we can execute as long as we get the right partnerships and cooperation.
Well, that's fantastic. Has the, I guess I hate to even use the term benefit associated with the pandemic, but has the increase in telework and the ability of folks to sort of do their jobs from wherever they might be, has that injected some new economic life and vitality to rural or left behind regions from your perspective?
I think it has to a degree, but I think the potential is virtually unlimited, especially in a rural state like Kansas. So, the pandemic has taught us all that there are other opportunities, other ways to do things out there. And as they say, never waste a good crisis. We're trying not to waste that here. And one of the things that we need, though, if we're not going to waste this crisis, if we're going to do more things virtually and remote, is we need broadband. So even here in Manhattan, Kansas, which is a fairly good-sized community, you go very far outside the boundaries of Manhattan, Kansas, you don't have the broadband, the cellular coverage to connect to the world, to your courses. So we had to help put in some around here, but in other parts of Kansas, it's just not existent right now. And so if you want to connect these people to the world, to the world ecosystem, broadband is one of those fundamental things that has to happen. I know it's in the infrastructure bill. We'll have to see how that plays out. But particularly for a rural state, if we want to capitalize and leave nobody behind, we've got to make sure we get that broadband to them.
You said just a minute ago that we sort of stepped up on helping to get broadband to people. Is that something that Kansas State is doing, or is that in partnership with the state? How is that happening? It was in partnership with carriers. Kansas State did a part, the state did a part, trying to use any federal money that could possibly be used for this that was part of the COVID money, if you will. But those were great efforts for the time, but they're not sufficient for the future. And so, yeah, it was all of us working together on that. Our CIO, we want him to be on the kind of boards in Topeka, Kansas, our capital, where he can have influence on how we think about broadband and the importance of that to making people connect to the ecosystem, but also to get degrees. I mean, we know we can do a lot of virtual work online today, all sorts of degrees. And so people out in the middle of Kansas don't have to come to Manhattan or Lawrence, Kansas, where KU is and study. They can study right there at home and do well. And we just have to have the connectivity. Without that, that doesn't work. Great. Well, Dick, let me close with this question for you. You mentioned a few minutes ago the importance of partnerships. Are there any best practices that you might want to share with folks today that, from your experience in Kansas and K-State that are possibly replicable in other parts of the country?
Well, one's pretty obvious, and that is you got to have a plan. You have to do some strategic planning. It takes a lot of people to do that. It can be tedious while you're doing it, but it's really important do you have a roadmap for where you're going. I'm not sure we have any best practices right now that I'd offer up. I think in the future, as we think about the future of land grants in the 21st century, I think we can play a critical role in the sort of bringing people into this ecosystem. And we have a model for that. All the land grants do, because we're in every county in the state of Kansas. We're in 105 counties with our research and extension efforts. We need a model like that, not using research and extension, but a model like that where we're in every county, that we use the credibility and the trust that's built up around research and extension to bring education to people, to bring ideas from people in rural Kansas back to campus and provide the capital to push some of those ideas forward. So again, it all relies on broadband, but that's, I think, we call it a K105 for the 105 counties. That's part of our economic prosperity plan. If we do that right, I think that'll be a best practice, and it will help define the role of land-grant universities in this century.
Fantastic. Well, Dick, I think we're going to have to end it there as our time is up, but I really want to thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate you sending along the governor's best wishes, and appreciate the time that you've given us. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Bill, and hi to all the council folks.
Thank you, President Myers, for your deep insights on the future of place-based innovation, the challenges and the great opportunities if we as a nation build out all of the diverse and expertise across our country to have an innovation nation going forward. We've had an incredible afternoon today for the 2021 National Competitiveness Forum of the Council on Competitiveness. First, let me thank all of our members and all of our partners who've joined us today. And of course, to our tremendous speakers. On behalf of the board and the executive committee, I want to also formally thank Secretaries Granholm and Raimondo and Senator Klobuchar for representing the power and potential and commitment of our great public sector leaders and teaming with the Council on Competitiveness, our members from across industry, academia, labor, and the national labs to build our innovation and competitive future. The Council stands ready to engage with all of our nation's policy leaders, the federal level, states, and in regions to build this new innovation agenda. It's my great honor again to congratulate Janet Fouty, the executive chair of Deloitte USA, on becoming the Council's new business vice chair. Janet, I know we will build on the decade-plus work of the Council and Deloitte undertaken together on a range of critical competitiveness issues and drivers, from pioneering research on the future of innovation to mapping the world's manufacturing potential and the emergence of the United States as a major 21st century manufacturing power. We are very excited for what comes next under the leadership of Janet as our vice chair for business, coming together with the great board of directors of the Council on Competitiveness. And so first, let me thank our chairman, Brian Moynihan, for his tremendous leadership and commitment to the Council, our university vice chair, Joan Gable, our labor vice chair, Lonnie Stevenson, and our chair emeritus, Chad Holliday. We've heard today several of the key themes that will shape the Council's 2022 agenda and beyond. And let me first just start by saying that the conversation today between Brian Moynihan as chairman of the Council and CEO of Bank of America, and Chad Holliday, chairman emeritus of the Council, and until recently the chairman of Royal Dutch Shell, on the future of sustainability and the incredible leadership we're seeing now from the private sector in really marshaling the resources and commitment to drive the sustainability agenda writ large was very, very exciting. And this is certainly something that the Council's flagship National Commission on Innovation and Competitiveness Frontiers will be carrying forward in the next year. I was very struck how Brian said that there's a big commitment now globally from private sector leaders and government and public at large about, what did he say, 8 to 9 on the scale. But when it comes to actual execution and implementation, we still have a long way to go. And that's where the work of the Council on Competitiveness is so very, very important. We had a great discussion today on the intersection of energy, food, and water. Again, making explicit that sustainability writ large will depend increasingly on the democratization of knowledge and innovation, the proliferation of pioneering partnerships, and really marshaling these new exponential technologies that are transforming our world as we speak and live today. I think we had a very interesting discussion on what actually is digital water. And I think we all now know what that actually means in terms of the products that we use and the water footprint in building, designing, and using those products. Similarly, we had a very provocative conversation around the future of research that emphasized, yes, the points around systemic democratization, but also we outlined a national imperative for really radical reform in the funding of our scientific enterprise and the cultivation of America's next hyper-diverse and inclusive generation of researchers, innovators, and entrepreneurs. And how, again, back to the imperative for place-based innovation, we have to move beyond the current culture of how venture capitalists invest in scaling the technologies of the future, not so much around superheroes, but around capabilities and technology assets, and recognizing the huge talent that we have in our country, throughout our country, to carry these capabilities into new businesses and services and wealth creation. Supporting this focus on the future of innovation, we were very excited this year to have a great series of tech chats, as it were, each of which imparted a feel for what's to come across the nation's energy enterprise and digital manufacturing, advanced materials and semiconductors, and cybersecurity and resiliency, and for consumer-driven innovation in the circular economy. Again, back to this overarching theme of sustainability and competitiveness. And again, throughout these discussions, what we know is that people and place matter tremendously. Our significant conversations around learning, skills development, and work underscored the challenges our companies, our colleges, and unions are facing in delivering the very specialized skills now required in virtually all jobs to a more diverse and inclusive America, not centered just around a few great cities and many cities and urban agglomerations, but also preparing our workforce characterized by the opportunities that can come from continuous evolution and change throughout our great country. We heard from cutting-edge leaders on new efforts to redefine and redesign living standards, focusing not just on lifespans, but on our health spans, learning quickly in the accelerated innovation space unleashed by the current COVID-19 pandemic, but also by the generational investments in long-term basic research and development, the seed corn of our innovation. And as we close today, of course, I want to thank and recognize our NCF sponsors, Lockheed Martin, Snap-on, the University of Georgia, the University of Wisconsin, and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Going forward, as we face a new year soon, 2022, the council team and I will be in touch with you as we develop our very ambitious agenda with you across many fronts. The expansion and deepening of our National Commission on Innovation and Competitiveness Frontiers was foreshadowed, as I've mentioned, in the opening remarks of our chairman, Brian Moynihan, and our chairman emeritus, Chad Holliday. I'm very pleased to announce we are going to host a major regional innovation summit in the first half of the coming year under the auspices of the commission. This summit will be hosted in Wyoming by National Commissioners Ed Seidel, the president of the University of Wyoming, Greg Hill, the president and CEO of Hess Corporation, who I might mention had some very fascinating remarks about plant root-based systems for carbon capture and sequestration and the frontiers of fossil fuel innovation and sustainability, and John Wagner, the director of Idaho National Laboratory. And we're very excited that we will be with the governor of the state of Wyoming. And more announcements to come on the commission front. We will also see the continuing virtual engagement of our chief technology officers and our advanced computing roundtable and university leadership forum. However, I hope that with the pace of our virtual meetings and all of these initiatives of the council, we also are very committed to returning to in-person meetings this coming year, and look forward to many of our members hosting activities at their campuses, businesses, and national labs across the country. And many of these dates are already on the calendar. The council continues our leadership as the founder and board member of the Global Federation of Competitiveness Councils. I know many of you participated a week or so ago in our 2021 Global Innovation Summit that was virtual this year around the 5 pillars of innovation, sustainability, resiliency, partnerships and inclusivity. It was a great discussion with our members and leaders from around the world. And I'm pleased that our partners in Athens, Greece will be hosting the 2020 Global Innovation Summit in Greece next November. But before we get to Greece, we will be teaming the U.S. Council and the GFCC with our longstanding partner, the Confederation of Industry in Brazil, for the 9th Brazil Innovation Summit this March. And again, we hope that many of the council's members will join the Council on Competitiveness delegation to the CNI Summit. Our Chief Technology Officer community will re-energize efforts to partner with our peers in Australia. We've been working again virtually, but hope in 2022 we will be able to re-engage in person with our great partners in Australia, CSIRO, and the Committee on Competitiveness, Advisory Committee on Competitiveness in Healthcare, where again, the very strategic national partnership between the US and Australia and the UK and other allies is being carried forward through technology statecraft as well. I hope all of you will look at our 2020 soon to be released Council on Competitiveness new website, compete.org. This new platform is going to feature prominently the ideas, the images, and words of our membership as we enter our 36th year. And we'll be in touch with you soon for a first look, and very importantly, how you can participate in co-creating the content for our website. I want to thank very much all of our members and of course our executive committee, our general members, our national laboratory partners, our national affiliates, and our great distinguished fellows and senior fellows of the council for your continued support and engagement. The council is all about collaboration, partnership, and building a future together in which we all have much to contribute, but we must work together to achieve the competitiveness, the prosperity, the productivity, and security of our country. I want, of course, thank the great council team, our two executive vice presidents, Chad Evans and Bill Bates, for their tremendous work and participation in both the design and execution of the summit, as well as Yasmin Hilbert and our entire team, subject matter, our great public affairs and communication partners for ensuring a seamless execution today. So let me wish everyone a wonderful upcoming holiday, safe travels wherever you're going to be, or if you're at home as well, and look forward to seeing you in person in 2022. Thank you so much.